Chapter 580. The Navy camp needed to be built in Deepwater City. Su Lin put away the blueprint and looked at the rest of the things. There was a crystal bottle and a scroll of information. Su Lin took out the crystal bottle. There was a shining silver liquid in the crystal bottle, and the whole room was instantly illuminated with a layer of silver light. It looked as beautiful as the moonlight at night. Countless starlights swayed in the crystal bottle. This small crystal bottle seemed to have contained the entire galaxy. It looked very beautiful. Moonlight dew, the legendary magical dew condensed from the moon. It gathers a large amount of moonlight power. It has the magical effect of removing evil power, pollution, purifying blood, improving physical fitness, and speeding up the fusion of various energies. Su Lin checked the attributes of the moonlight dew with identification. This bottle of moonlight dew could remove pollution, which was good news for Su Lin. He had not absorbed the divinity crystal stone he got after killing the abomination, mainly because of the pollution and evil power on it. Now that he had the moonlight dew, he could remove the pollution and evil power on it and speed up the fusion of energy, which could save him a lot of time. When he returned to Northern City, he was ready to integrate the divinity into his body. Although the crystal bottle looked only the size of a palm, the space inside was still very large. On the surface, it seemed to only contain 50 milliliters of moonlight dew, but in fact, its capacity was 1 cubic meter, which was enough for a bath. Not only was it enough for Su Lin, but it was also enough for Hathaway, Phyllis, and the others. After putting away the crystal bottle, Su Lin picked up the scroll next to it. The scroll looked like it was made of a material similar to gold foil. Its texture was soft like paper, but it was very tough. Su Lin clearly felt that this scroll contained a strange magic power. This scroll was actually a magic item. Using a magic item to record knowledge, Su Lin was suddenly very interested in this scroll. The most famous magic scrolls in history were the artifacts, the Nether Secret Scrolls. There were a total of 108 Nether Secret Scrolls, which recorded the knowledge of almost all schools. This set of artifacts created a glorious era, and even the Arcane Empire was established on the basis of these scrolls. It was the source of the rise of the Age of Thorium and the cornerstone of the birth of the great arcanists. In the Age of Thorium, almost all spellcasters gained a lot of knowledge from this ancient scroll. The ancient Arcane Empire civilization started from here. Even now, Hathaway used a large number of spells that originated from the knowledge in the Nether Scrolls. The complete Netherese scrolls were divided into 2 parts, with a total of 108 golden scrolls. Legend had it that this scroll was written by the combined efforts of many ancient gods of order. The upper half of the Nether Scrolls had been destroyed during the Age of Thorium, while the lower half had been stolen. Their whereabouts were still unknown. Only a few scattered Nether Scrolls were preserved in the entire multiverse. This divine artifact contained the knowledge of the creation of the Mice Energy Core. Even the original floating city was built with the knowledge contained in it. In the Age of Thorium, the great arcanists even felt that as long as they read enough knowledge in the Nether Scrolls, it could help them directly become gods. It could be said that this was the origin of a powerful civilization. The Nether Scrolls not only contained a variety of mysterious and powerful knowledge, but these scrolls themselves were also powerful artifacts. When reading these scrolls, they could also obtain many powerful supreme magic abilities and talents, and even directly upgrade one's profession level. Of course, this artifact was so powerful, but not everyone could read it. After the experiments of the ancient arcane mathematicians, every time a scroll was read, one could upgrade one's level. The threshold for reading the scroll was very low, but most people could only read the first page. Generally, people with strong minds and developed brains could read up to the 8th page, while most wizards could only read up to the 5th page. As for reading all the Nether Scrolls, since the discovery of the Nether Scrolls until now, no human had accomplished this feat. As for those who thought they were clever and wanted to read more knowledge, they were either crazy or their brains exploded from the knowledge. Of course, there were also ways for humans to read more Nether Scrolls without going crazy, such as divinity, or becoming a favorite of the gods. Divinity could rebirth matter, and naturally, it could also increase the limits of the human brain. If someone claimed to have read the entire set of Netherese scrolls, they were either bragging, or they were reading fake scrolls. There was a limit to how much a mortal could read, because the mortal brain could no longer contain this knowledge. It was impossible to continue reading after digesting it for a few years. Only gods could read a lot of them. The existing Netherese scrolls were basically incomplete, and the knowledge recorded in them was not very important. The scroll in Sullen's hand was a remnant of the Netherese scrolls. It recorded the knowledge of using spells to create a complete biosphere. As long as this knowledge was mastered, one could build a complete biosphere even in the astral plane. This technology seemed useless, but in fact, it was an essential technology for the floating city. It was fine for the floating city in the prime material plane, as it did not require overly complicated ecosphere technology, and could be replenished at any time and place, but once it entered the astral plane or went to other planes for interstellar colonization, this technology was too important. There were many planes whose environments were not suitable for human survival. There was no air, no gravity, no water, and no sunlight in the astral plane. Without the support of a biosphere system, except for powerful wizards, ordinary people would die if they entered. Therefore, biosphere technology was very important to the floating city. Only with a complete biosphere technology could the floating city drift in the astral plane for thousands of years without any supplies. Sulen picked up the scroll and looked at it. This scroll was made of gold leaf and was 8 inches wide. There was a large amount of silver magic writing on the golden scroll. These magic words were constantly flowing slowly, as if they were alive. Sullen's Netherese scroll was incomplete. It was only 6 inches long, and the knowledge recorded on it was only about the construction of biospheres. Even so, this Netherese scroll was a very precious tool. One had to know that there might not be a complete Netherese scroll in the entire continent now. Sulen simply looked at the Netherese scroll. He could basically understand the knowledge recorded on it. Magic words were a very magical language. Even if you were completely illiterate, you would know the meaning of these magic scrolls when you saw them. However, it was not so easy to understand. It would take at least a few months for an ordinary person to read a Netherese scroll. How much knowledge they could master in the end depended on their own talent. Sullen's Netherese scroll could not increase one's talent or metamagic abilities. It could only allow one to master some spells and knowledge. It was not very useful for increasing one's strength, but it was very helpful for improving one's control of energy. After looking through the scroll, Sulen put it away. Now was not the time to study these things. There was still no sign of the floating city. However, when he returned, he could first open up a demiplane to experiment. Even if he built the floating city in the future, this demiplane could be connected to the floating city. After putting the scroll away again, Sulen began to deal with the affairs of the city. After being taught a lesson by Sulen, the surrounding nobles all became well-behaved. All kinds of resources were sent to the city, and the refugees who had escaped from the city were sent back. The reconstruction of the city required a lot of manpower. Sulen could not let the army rebuild the city, so he could only rely on the refugees. After receiving a lot of resources, Sulen directly used the method of providing relief through work. Most of the refugees were poor. After Sulen promised to work hard and give them houses after the city was built, the refugees became very enthusiastic. In order to rebuild the city, Sulen transferred a group of grassroots officials from San Filto. These officials had basically just completed their training in the academy. They were also a bit flustered when they were brought here to work. However, with the army around and Sulen's guidance, there were no problems. These people had been trained and had a good foundation. Although they were a bit flustered at first, they quickly adapted, and all kinds of work were on the right track. Northern Citadel already had enough experience with this method of providing relief through work. As long as there were enough resources and grassroots officials with good work efficiency and execution, it could be done easily. This method of providing relief through work had been proposed in ancient times. It was first implemented during the reign of Duke Jinggong of the Kingdom of Qi in the spring and autumn period. There was a story in the spring and autumn annals of Yan Zi that said, due to the hunger of the Kingdom of Qi, Yan Zi was forced to provide relief to the people because of the battle at Lumu. To put it bluntly, this method had long been used by the ancestors. It was not a bad method, but why wasn't it popularized? The key was the problem of governance. As long as the problem of governance was not solved, even the best policies would be useless. Many times, the country would allocate a lot of food during disaster years, but in the end, it would be good if even a tenth of it reached the hands of the common people. People were very familiar with all kinds of tricks like burning the granaries and borrowing food from the Yin soldiers. Sulan had the political education of the prison and the powerful supervision of the embroidered uniform guard. Those who dared to commit corruption were directly sent to the Eagle Castle to breed with the harpies. Only such a strict system allowed the officials of Northern Citadel to fulfill the conditions of providing relief through work. Otherwise, according to the nature of the nobles of this era, they would be lucky if they did not sell the refugees as slaves. Chapter 581. The damage to the walls of the city wasn't too severe. Only the city gates and part of the walls were damaged. The dragon had flown straight in when it first attacked the city, and the gates were destroyed by it. Fortunately, it was a white dragon that attacked the city. The white dragon's breath was a breath of ice. Although it was powerful, it wouldn't have caused a fire. If it had been a red dragon, the city probably wouldn't have needed to be repaired. They could have just rebuilt it somewhere else. The houses in the city were more severely damaged. After all, the northern barbarians had plundered the city without restraint. Sulan had demolished all the severely damaged areas and flattened the slums in the city. The city was rebuilt according to the model Sulan had used to rebuild the other cities in the Kingdom of Florence. This saved a lot of work. As the city's restoration work began, the refugees who had escaped from the city began to return to their homes. Originally, there were 50,000 to 60,000 residents in the city. After a series of natural and man-made disasters such as war and fleeing, Su Luan estimated that at most 30,000 people could return from the city. In addition to the people Sulan had forced from the surrounding nobles' territories, the final population of the city could reach 50,000 people. The city had basically recovered to its pre-war level. Apart from the refugees, Sulan also selected 500 able-bodied refugees to train the militia. The First Legion of Sanfurto couldn't be stationed here for long. The soldiers in the city had either died or escaped, and there weren't many left. As a border city, it couldn't do without a sufficient army to defend it. Sulan had no choice but to start the training from scratch. Training a militia of 500 people wasn't difficult. Sulan's veterans could easily do the job. After the training, Sulan ordered the barbarian warriors to bring the militia to the wilderness as soon as possible so that they could become capable of fighting. Because the city had been conquered, the surrounding land was completely out of control. Many kobolds and goblins had become much more active in the wilderness. Now that a new army had been formed, these monsters could be used as practice. At the same time, the captives would be sent to the city's construction site to work. Restoring the city required a large amount of manpower, and the city of Wallachia did not have enough manpower. Now that there were goblins and kobolds to provide the manpower, Sulan naturally did not mind. Those new recruits only needed to go through a few encirclement and suppression battles before they could be considered qualified soldiers. Then, they would not be afraid to fight against the gnolls and northern barbarians of the wilderness. The battlefield was the best place to train new recruits. After a few battles, these people would become elites. Of course, only Sulan could do this. As long as the army under his command did not reach the upper limit, killing enemies would give experience. As long as they didn't die in battle, they would level up after a few uses. As a border city, 500 soldiers were far from enough. Sulen planned to station 5,000 soldiers in the city. Of course, Wallachia alone would not be able to support so many soldiers, so the soldiers' pay and food were provided by the kingdom. The army was also directly under the kingdom's command. Sulen planned to expand the city to 100,000 people. Wallachia city had many mines, such as copper, iron, and coal. While it was not very big, it would be enough to supply the surrounding cities. Sulen had also checked the land outside the city. It was considered fertile, and the surrounding water was abundant. Just the plains near the city would be enough to support 100,000 people. Wallachia city was also the only way from the Northwest Desert Kingdom to Northgard city. As long as there were no problems, the city would soon prosper. After taking control of the city, the surrounding nobles would have no choice but to obey the king's orders. Sulen stayed in Wallachia city for half a month, then handed everything over to the newly appointed consul before returning to Northgard city. Northwind Tower, Astrology Platform. A beam of light rose, and Sulen's figure appeared on the astrology platform. "Master, welcome back." Half-elf maid Angela quickly appeared. Sulen patted Angela's head and asked, "Where are the others?" "Sister Hathaway is in the lab. Sister Alex has returned to Eagle Castle. Sister Karina and Sister Xanthi are in the mystic realm," Angela said softly. "By the way, how's the development in the city recently?" Sulen asked as he took off his cloak. "Nothing has happened in the city recently. A while ago, we gave the serfs the status of commoners according to your orders. The other serfs were stimulated and worked very hard recently. Also, the number of people who came to settle down in Northgard city has been increasing rapidly. According to the City Hall statistics, the permanent population of Northgard city has exceeded 170,000 people. If this trend continues, it's very likely to exceed 200,000 people this year. Looks like they're working well." Sulen nodded with satisfaction. He took a sip of the black tea Angela handed to him. "Master, the goods that you instructed us to prepare have all been completed. Do you want to take a look?" Angela reminded. "They're all ready so quickly." Sulen was a little surprised. He prepared these goods to open up the sea trade route. They were going to be transported to the eastern continent to be sold. Now that the goods were ready, it was time to open up the new sea route. However, some preparatory work had to be done. The navy camp Sulen obtained this time had to be built as soon as possible. At the same time, the divinity had to be absorbed and integrated. Not long ago, Suren had absorbed 2 divinity crystals obtained from the abomination. There were still 6 divinity crystals in his own divinity crystal, 7 in Hathaway's divinity crystal, and a lot in the god's corpse sealed in the basement. With so much divinity added up, the divinity of a god with weak divine power was more than enough. Soon, Sulen arrived at Hathaway's laboratory, and poured a part of the moonlight dew into a crystal bottle. The entire laboratory was instantly illuminated in a silvery white color. "It really is moonlight dew." Hathaway looked at the liquid in surprise. "This thing is not easy to find. It's a waste to use it to remove the pollution and evil power on the divinity crystals directly." "It's okay, I still have a lot. Besides, it's not safe to keep the divinity crystals in your hands. It's better to integrate them into your body quickly and convert them into strength directly." "That's true." Hathaway thought for a moment and agreed. The next step was to set up the runic magic circle. Although it was possible to use the moonlight dew to remove the pollution and evil power directly, it required more moonlight dew to do so. The requirements for the purification runic magic circle were not high, and Hathaway completed it quickly. Sulen poured the moonlight dew into the center of the magic circle, and a silvery white aura shrouded it. With the surge of magic, the moonlight dew was quickly integrated into the magic circle, and the whole magic circle shone with a sense of holiness. Hathaway waved her hand gently, and a wave of magic emerged. Then, the whole runic magic circle began to operate. Sulen took out a black stone. As soon as the palm-sized stone appeared, an evil and chaotic aura suddenly spread out. The whole laboratory was filled with this chaotic and evil power. Soon, Sulen put the stone into the runic magic circle. After the silvery white energy sensed the stone, it immediately released a dazzling brilliance. A sizzling sound was constantly heard, and waves of black evil energy and pollution power were constantly purified by the silver light. As the silver light continued to flicker, the pollution power on the stone became weaker and weaker. The originally black stone gradually changed from black to purple gold. When all the pollution power was removed, the aura of the runic magic circle also dimmed. Sulen picked up the divinity crystal from the runic magic circle, and then released some soul power to examine it. Soon, Sulen opened his eyes with satisfaction. All the evil power and pollution power on the divinity crystal had been removed. Not only that, even the original soul consciousness of the abomination had been directly erased. In other words, this divinity crystal could be directly extracted and integrated with. After seeing that the purification was successful, Hathaway also took out the divinity crystal in her hand and put it into the runic magic circle. Then, she activated the magic circle once again. The silvery white aura lit up, and the two completely opposite energies continued to fight. The silver energy constantly removed the chaotic and evil aura on the divinity crystal. Sizzling sounds were constantly heard, and finally, all the evil aura was completely removed. The aura of the runic magic circle slowly dissipated. The moonlight dew in the runic magic circle had turned into a colorless and transparent liquid. The energy in the moonlight dew had been completely consumed. Sulen took out some moonlight dew again and gave it to Hathaway to integrate with the divinity. The power of divinity could directly change her body from the original mortal to a divine creature. Her physical fitness would be improved, and at the same time, her soul would become more powerful. Although it did not increase her magic knowledge, it would improve her learning, understanding, and control in all aspects. This was equivalent to directly increasing her upper limit. By the way, the goods to the eastern continent have been prepared. We will set off in a while. You can arrange the time when the time comes, Sulen reminded her. I know. I will arrange everything when the time comes. In addition, I will directly set up a teleportation circle on the magic ship. I can rush back anytime, anywhere. Hathaway waved her hand and carefully put away the divinity crystal and moonlight dew. That's good. Sulen nodded and said, by the way, I also got a nether scroll this time. What did you say? Where is it? Show it to me. Before Sulen finished speaking, Hathaway instantly grabbed Sulen's arm excitedly and asked. Chapter 582. What's the rush? Sulen grabbed Hathaway and pinched her nose. You're the chief wizard of the Northwind Tower. Who else can I give it to? Sulen took out a golden scroll from his inventory and handed it to Hathaway. This is the legendary treasure trove of knowledge, the Nether Secret Scroll? Hathaway looked at the golden scroll in front of her with curiosity. Legend has it that you only need to learn the knowledge in this scroll to level up your profession and obtain talents. So this is what the Nether Secret Scroll looks like. This is a remnant scroll. The knowledge in it is not a powerful spell. It's biosphere technology. If you have time, you can learn it. Anyway, you'll definitely need it to build the floating city in the future, Sulen said directly. Biosphere technology. Hathaway was a little disappointed. I was wondering if it was the technology to create the mice energy core. Are you dreaming? Sulen reached out and pinched Hathaway's bouncy cheeks, then put her down. The mice energy core can be said to be the top technology in the Nether Secret Scroll. How can it be so easy to get it? Sulen shook his head. Hathaway wrinkled her nose. Then what will be the energy core of the floating city in the future? Let's use the elemental fission furnace first, Su Len said after thinking for a moment. The energy produced by the elemental fission furnace is not enough to let the floating city leave the main material plane. Hathaway said, only when the elemental fusion furnace can the floating city be supported to roam the astral plane. Don't we have a full set of information on elemental fission and elemental fusion? We can slowly level it up. Su Len said with a smile. There's no sign of the floating city yet. There's no need to rush. That's true. Then I'll go fuse with the divinity first. Hathaway picked up the nether secret scroll and left the room. After leaving the Northwind Tower, Su Len went to the Arcanum to prepare to fuse with the divinity. He now had 7 divinity in the divinity crystal in his hand. Not long ago, he had extracted the Baylor's divinity crystal and also extracted the Abomination's divinity crystal. If he fused all the remaining divinity, his divinity power would reach an astonishing 20 points. Although 20 divinity points could not trigger a transformation from the soul to the body, it would still improve Sullen's power. After Su Len asked the Tower Spirit Tower Genie, he began fusing with the divinity crystal. Compared to the previous times he fusing with divinity, the fusion this time was much easier. A large amount of divinity was fused into Sullen's body. He had transformed from a human to a demigod. His body also had some divinity characteristics. For example, it was easier to fuse with divinity. After being purified by the moonlight dew, the divinity crystal was no longer black like before. It was purple with a golden glow. It looked very beautiful. Su Len gently pointed, and the divinity crystal flew into the air. A strange energy field instantly enveloped the entire room. Soul Wander. A powerful spell flashed, and a shadow walked out of Sullen's body. It was his soul. After absorbing a large amount of divinity, Sullen's soul had become pale gold. His soul did not feel illusory at all. Instead, it looked solid. Sullen's soul had surpassed the mortal and had a trace of immortality. After the soul left the body, Su Len suddenly had a light feeling. It was as if all the shackles had been removed in an instant. The soul would have this feeling after leaving the body. After entering the soul state, Su Len became more sensitive to energy. After adapting to the soul state, he began to cast spells. A golden light flashed. Divinity extraction. The golden light was extracted from the divinity crystal and then poured into Sullen's body. The golden light on his soul began to increase. A large amount of golden light was extracted. The golden light in the divinity crystal was extracted little by little. As time passed, the golden light in the divinity crystal became less and less. Soon, all the divinity was extracted. Su Len burped. His soul felt bloated. Then, with a flash of light, his soul returned to the body. Just now, he had only swallowed the divinity. It would take some time for him to completely integrate it. However, this was already many times more efficient than before. From the storage space, he took out the moonlight dew that he had already prepared. The room was filled with moonlight. Su Len gently flicked the bottle of moonlight dew. Countless water droplets with starlight instantly floated up. A strange energy spread out from Sullen's body. These water droplets with starlight slowly integrated into Sullen's body. The moonlight dew passed through the body and directly entered the soul. A cool feeling spread out from the soul. It was as if Su Len was purified from the inside out, from the soul to the body. The speed of the integration of the divinity instantly increased several times. In the depths of Sullen's soul, a ray of moonlight illuminated the entire spiritual world. As the moonlight continued to enter the body, some of the impurities in Sullen's body were also slowly cleaned out. These impurities were the residue in the soul. After cleaning up these residue, Sullen's soul became clearer, and the integration of the divinity became more perfect. In the end, when all the moonlight entered the body, the integration of the divinity in Sullen's soul was complete. With the help of the moonlight dew, Su Len finally completed the integration of the divinity. However, this had temporarily reached a limit. He could not continue the integration for a short period of time. Su Len slowly opened his eyes. A ray of light flashed from the bottom of his eyes. The entire room was illuminated at this moment. Just after the integration of the divinity, Su Len moved his body. A powerful force emerged from his body, and he regained control of his body. After coming out of the room and asking the tower spirit, Su Len learned that 2 days had passed. Su Len did not stay any longer. He directly went to Deepwater City through the teleportation formation. He would soon go to the eastern continent. He needed to finish the construction of the Navy camp as soon as possible. Deepwater City's construction speed was very fast during this period. After the barbarians continuously cleared the surrounding monsters, a large number of kobolds, goblins, and gnolls were caught as laborers. The city could be said to be different every day. When Su Len came to Deepwater City again, the city walls were almost finished. Because Deepwater City was a trading port, the scale of the city was very large from the beginning. Su Len directly designed the city according to the scale of 100,000 people. After this period of migration, Deepwater City now had about 12,000 people. Most of these people were refugees who migrated to the northern city. Su Len directly arranged for them to board the ships in the northern city, and then they went along the Red Sand River to Deepwater City. At the same time, the northern city also transported a large number of bricks and other building materials by water. After several years of development, the northern city's production of various building materials was very high. With enough materials and abundant manpower, the city's construction speed was different every day. Su Len had a simple understanding of the affairs of Deepwater City. Consul Holland did a very good job. All kinds of things were arranged in an orderly manner. The whole city was busy but not chaotic. Everything was in order. Everyone was working at their respective posts. The port of Deepwater City had been completed. The whole port was wide and flat, and the berths were neatly arranged. There was even a specially built shelter. The port's water depth was 12 meters, and it could dock all the ships of this era. It was an excellent deepwater port. However, the breakwater of the port had not been built yet. The amount of work required to build a breakwater was very high, and a lot of rocks were needed. Now that the deepwater port had just been built, there was not enough manpower to build a breakwater. Fortunately, the deepwater port was near the Red Sand River. If there was a storm on the sea, the ships could sail into the river or dock at the island in the middle of the river. Su Len looked for Holland after checking the construction sites in the city. He asked him to send some people to the island in the middle of the river to build a navy camp. The navy camp could not be built anywhere. After looking for a while, Su Len finally decided to build it on the island in the middle of the river. Although the island was close to the sea, the wind and waves were not too strong. It was very suitable for new recruits to train. Moreover, it was surrounded by water and separated from the outside world. It was not easy to be disturbed. It was very good for training troops. After hearing Sullen's request, Holland immediately sent 2 100-man teams to Su Len to build the navy camp. All kinds of materials were directly transported to the island in the middle of the river. These 2 100-man teams were all experienced craftsmen. In the past few years, the construction of the northern town city had never stopped. Therefore, there were a lot of experienced craftsmen in the city. Su Len directly gave them the blueprint of the camp and told them to build it according to the blueprint. The construction of the navy camp did not need to be too complicated. There were all kinds of materials, and it would not take long to build it. After making the arrangements, Su Len asked people to keep an eye on the place and then went to the shipyard. At this time, the shipyard was very busy. Since Su Len announced the opening of the new waterway, the shipyard had worked overtime to build ships. Although the shipbuilders were a little rusty in the beginning, after building a sailboat, a training warship, and an armed merchant ship, they were very experienced. Next, they began to build real warships and merchant ships. Su Len planned to build a navy in Deepwater City. It would be used to maintain the safety of the waterway, protect the port, eliminate pirates, and crack down on smuggling. This warship was allowed to carry out commercial activities, so the ships were built to be slender. This appearance could increase the speed of the ships, and they could be used to chase pirates or provide quick support. The ships were made of iron oak wood. This wood was slightly heavier than ordinary wood, but its defensive power was not inferior to steel. At the same time, it was also resistant to corrosion. It was a very good shipbuilding material. The only problem was that it was very expensive. The output of iron oak wood was not high, and the price was high. Fortunately, it was also produced in the northern wilderness. Chapter 583. After Su Len came to this world, he experimented with making gunpowder, but to his disappointment, gunpowder couldn't explode at all. Cannons could only stay on the drawing board. Su Len heard that the mountain dwarves had something similar to gunpowder, which was used to split rocks and excavate mineral deposits, but the material was very expensive. The dwarves called this gunpowder-like thing fire crystal powder, and the main material was a kind of fire crystal stone. After the fire crystal stone was ground and mixed with several other materials, it would produce an effect similar to that of gunpowder. However, this kind of thing was much more expensive than gunpowder. Even in the southern seas, there were very few ships equipped with this kind of fire crystal powder weapon. Su Luen intended to build some fire crystal cannons and install them on his warships. The first batch of Marines trained by Barbassa returned to Deepwater City. Although this batch of Marines had only been trained for 3 months, their strength had reached the requirements. After all, in order to train qualified Marines as soon as possible, Barbassa directly took these people on the ocean voyage. If Su Len hadn't prepared a lot of underwater breathing potions for them, half of this batch of Marines would have died. After 3 months of intensive training, these people had experienced the baptism of several storms on the ocean. Under such cruel conditions, these people's level naturally improved rapidly. This training method was basically to directly let the recruits take weapons to the battlefield and let the battlefield educate them. This method was cruel, but as long as they survived, they would soon transform into elites. However, this situation usually happened among pirates. Pirates didn't give you time to train and adapt. They fought and sailed again and again. Pirates trained in this way could compete with Marines on the sea. Although underwater breathing potions and other protective measures had been prepared, there were still a few deaths in this batch of Marines. This was something that couldn't be helped. After the first batch of Marines, Deepwater City's first warship could be used. The next batch of Marines would be trained in the Navy camp. The training cycle of the Navy camp was 9 months. Although it seemed to be a long time, it was several times faster than the training of Marines in other countries. It took at least 2 years for a Marine to become proficient in operating a warship from a recruit. Compared with them, Su Len only needed 9 months, which was more than twice as fast. After checking the Marines, Su Len was satisfied with them, and then announced that their salary would be increased. Those who unfortunately died in the training would be compensated according to the standards of martyrs, and various supplies would be given to them by Northern Town City. After hearing that they had passed the test, all the soldiers cheered excitedly. These soldiers directly received citizenship in Northern Town City, and their families also received land and houses. Su Len was very generous to the army. After the completion of the training, Su Len gave the Marines a few days off, and then waited until the construction of the new warship was completed to officially establish the Navy. Barbassa was the Deepwater City's Navy. Deepwater City now had 2 ships, one was a training warship, and the other was an armed merchant ship. These 2 ships would not join the Navy. After all, these 2 ships were the practice works of Deepwater City's shipyard, and there were many problems in them. Of course, these problems were not serious, and it was not a problem to use them as merchant ships, but it was not possible to use them as warships. Sullen's deepwater city navy was about 2,500 people, with 15 to 20 main warships, as well as a number of scout ships and supply ships. Such a fleet was naturally incomparable to the navies of the southern countries, but the combat effectiveness of the deepwater city navy was not weak. Although the navies of the southern countries were powerful, few of their ships were built with iron oak wood. Iron oak wood had a very good firepower, and the hull was very hard. After installing a ram, it could easily destroy a ship made of teak at full speed. Even in his previous life, the ram was not completely retired from the stage of battle until the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. The reason was that the ram was very powerful. Many times, when there were naval battles at sea, both sides would fire hundreds of shells, and the result would be that although the two ships would be damaged, there would still be no signs of sinking. However, a weapon like the ram could kill the enemy in one hit. Such a powerful weapon was the trump card of naval pirates. As long as it was hit, it could easily create a huge hole in the side of the ship, and seawater would immediately gush in. It would not take long for the ship to sink. In contrast, the fire crystal cannon's power was very limited. After all, the fire crystal cannon's hit rate was not high, and on the sea, the hit rate was even worse. In the era of navigation in his previous life, artillery battles were completely done when two warships were side by side, relying on numbers to solve the problem of hit rate. This required a lot of money. Sulen planned to equip some fire crystal cannons, and at the same time prepare to study alchemy cannons. Alchemy cannons had been produced for a long time, but there was also a problem, and that was that the operators were wizards. Sulen wanted to let Hathaway modify the alchemy cannons to see if they could be used by ordinary people. If the modification was successful, then the army of Deepwater City would be able to sweep the sea. Alchemy cannons used mana, and directly injected mana into them to form a spell attack similar to a fireball spell. However, not long after this alchemy cannon was developed, it was thrown into a corner. The main reason was that wizards could already use fireballs, so why would they use alchemy cannons to attack? As a result, this alchemy cannon directly became a joke among wizards. Sulen helplessly shook his head about this idea of alchemy cannons. This thing had been going in the wrong direction from the beginning. He should have made alchemy cannons that ordinary people could use, not wizards. The blueprint of this alchemy cannon was collected in some wizard books as a negative example. Hathaway naturally knew about it, but it was not easy to modify it into a magic tool that could be used by ordinary people. The magic tools that wizards made were basically for wizards to use, and they rarely considered the use of ordinary people. However, it was not impossible. After all, some magic tools that could be triggered could be used by ordinary people. If alchemy cannons could be successfully made, Sulen planned to replace the ballistas on the magic ship with alchemy cannons. The ballistas on the magic ship had a range of 500 meters, and their shooting accuracy was very accurate. After the ballistas were modified with fire oil, the burning effect was very good. One salvo could set the ship on fire. However, compared to alchemy cannons, it was still a lot less powerful. Sulen was very clear about the power of fireballs. It was very threatening to wooden ships. A few fireballs could easily send a ship to the bottom of the sea. Sulen summoned the magic ship Raging Dragon. During this time, the ship had been sleeping at the bottom of the sea to accumulate energy. Now that the ship's energy was full, Sulen planned to take this magic ship to the eastern continent. This time, Sulen had prepared a large amount of resources for the trip to the eastern continent. At the same time, he would also take 2 merchant ships to form a fleet. The Raging Dragon had been tested a few times. No matter if it was sailing speed or defense, there were no problems. Under the curious gazes of the navy on the shore, the Raging Dragon slowly entered the port. The Raging Dragon was bigger than a warship or an armed merchant ship. Also, the Raging Dragon had cast a space spell, so the ship had a lot of space. It could carry a lot of goods. A lot of alchemy runes were added during the process of making the Raging Dragon. According to Hathaway's estimation, the ship's maximum speed could reach 80 nautical miles per hour. However, because the energy supply system was not mature, the Raging Dragon's current energy was charged by a magic circle. Usually, it needed to collect energy. Of course, wizards could also inject mana or place magic stones to extract energy, but the cost would be much higher. After collecting energy, the ship could sail at full speed for about a day. If it used cruising speed, the Raging Dragon could sail for about a month. Of course, if it only relied on sail power, it could sail at sea for a year if there was no war. Sulen boarded the Raging Dragon. There were also some merchants and scholars who were familiar with the eastern continent. Sulen was mainly going to do business this time. He did not want to cause any trouble. He wanted to open up a new channel to make money. The western continent was located in the north of the planet. It was quite a distance away from the eastern continent. In the southeast of the western continent, there was another continent near the equator. On the magic ship. The scholars who were familiar with the eastern continent were introducing the environment of the eastern continent to the merchants. There were a lot of poisonous creatures on this continent, so after arriving there, they must not eat anything in the wild. At the same time, they also talked about the local customs of the eastern continent. The proportion of poisonous creatures in the entire eastern continent was close to 1/10. That was to say, 1 in 10 species of creatures was poisonous. Therefore, the intelligent species of the entire eastern continent had gained additional poison resistance over the long period of biological evolution. Then, because the eastern continent was closer to the south, the environment there was hotter, and the climate changed more dramatically than here. It might be sunny in the morning, but it might become stormy in the afternoon. It was somewhat similar to a tropical rainforest. In addition to these, the eastern continent was also rich in products. Many specialties were completely unavailable in the western continent. In addition to these, the eastern continent was also the birthplace of the monks. Because of the serious accidents in the era of the Arcane Empire, there were many ancient evil creatures that were sealed on this continent. These evil creatures were basically suppressed by the monks' monasteries. Sulen was also very interested in these evil creatures. However, in this long time, many of them had been suppressed and killed. Maybe he could kill a few to earn some experience. Chapter 584. Sulen drove the furious dragon around the sea and returned to Deepwater City after satisfying his craving. The entire Deepwater City became extremely busy. Ships transporting goods from North Town City came one after another. All kinds of goods piled up in the warehouse of the dock. These goods would be loaded onto the furious dragon. In addition to these goods, more refugees were also sent here. Chris brought many refugees to Deepwater City. After this period of fusion, she had completely controlled her own power. With the help of the Soul Snatcher Church, she successfully absorbed the Baylor as nourishment and successfully advanced into a legendary demon. She had come this time to prevent the refugees from causing trouble. After all, these refugees who had just migrated from other places were being moved here again. This was different from the conditions they had previously promised. In order to prevent them from resisting, she had specifically asked Chris to handle it. With her charm that even legendary figures were extremely afraid of, these refugees had no complaints at all and were very well behaved. After arriving at Deepwater City, these people were quickly assigned to various places. After not seeing her for a while, Chris became even more attractive. Sulen, who had been exposed to the sea breeze for a week, was also a little restless. He was completely unrestrained. Looking at the furious dragon docked at the port, Sulen directly pulled Chris onto the ship. The furious dragon started, and the ship quickly submerged into the sea. The furious dragon entered underwater mode. The entire ship was wrapped in seawater like a crystal palace. In this environment, the two were particularly excited. it could be said that they had met their match. In Northtown City, the combat power of Hathaway, Karina, Xanthi, and the others added together could not compare to Chris. After all, the succubus had the talent bonus. However, facing Sullen's plasma cannon, they were still defeated. The furious dragon did not return to the port until the next day after going out to sea. After working overtime for this period of time, the construction of the Navy camp was finally completed. Next, Sulen recruited 2,000 refugees who were good at swimming to train. These people would be the Navy of Deepwater City in the future. At the same time, the shipyard on River Heart Island had also completed the construction of 2 armed merchant ships. The Deepwater City Chamber of Commerce, which had been established a long time ago, couldn't wait to take over the 2 merchant ships. After a simple trial run, the 2 merchant ships began to transport goods. After staying in Deepwater City for almost an hour, all the materials used for trading during this period of time had been transported here. The 2 armed merchant ships were quickly loaded. Hathaway also came to Deepwater City from the North Wind Tower. After everything was ready, the annual trade winds began to blow. Every year, this was the best season to trade with the Eastern continent. 2 days later, on a sunny morning, the furious dragon slowly sailed out of the Deepwater harbor with 2 armed merchant ships and then sailed towards the Eastern continent. The exchanges between the Eastern and Western continents were quite frequent. In the past 2,000 years, the trade between the Eastern and Western continents had begun to flourish. With the frequent exchanges between the 2 continents had begun to be influenced by each other. The most obvious example was the Sword Saint class. Sword Saints learned how to use Qi from monks, and then came the Qi raising slash, which became the signature skill of Sword Saints. As for the Sword Saint's ultimate skill, Bladestorm, it required specific conditions. Monks also evolved into a weapon master class because of the influence of the Western continent. Many high-grade mages were very wary of Sword Saints. After all, this class could break the energy shield of a high-grade wizard with a single slash. For high-grade wizards, Sword Saints were a greater threat than those rogues. However, although Sword Saints had powerful attack power, they also had obvious shortcomings. That was, their defense was very poor. Sword Saints couldn't wear armor, not to mention iron armor, they couldn't even wear leather armor. To put it bluntly, it was like a sword from the beginning to the end. Because they gave up all defense, Sword Saints gained unprecedented attack power, but this kind of power was fragile. On the battlefield, Sword Saints were always the first to be targeted. They didn't have the strong defense of warriors, nor did they have the survival ability of rogues, so Sword Saints had the highest death rate of all classes. Of course, if a Sword Saint had the help of a wizard, then the destruction they could cause would be beyond belief. In history, there was once a legendary Sword Saint who killed 3 legendaries. Greater haste plus greater enchanted weapon plus aura slash plus expose weakness plus whirlwind slash equals bladestorm. Because there were 2 armed merchant ships, the speed of the raging dragon was reduced to the same level as them. With the help of the ocean currents and trade winds, the speed of the armed merchant ships could reach 15 nautical miles per hour. It only took a day for the merchant ships of Deepwater City to enter the deep sea. We've traveled almost 400 nautical miles. Hathaway sat beside Sulen with some boredom. If the raging dragon didn't slow down, it was estimated that the ships behind them would have long been left behind. After a day of sailing, all they could see was the blue sea. At first glance, there was nothing on the sea. At first, the scenery of the sea looked good, but if there was no change, it would be boring. This was one of the reasons why many people couldn't stand ocean sailing. Being in an empty environment for a long time and having the same scenery could drive people crazy. This was also why both pirates and navies liked to keep 1 or 2 animals. When they were bored, they could tease them to relieve their boredom. In addition to Sulen and Hathaway, there were some attendants on the Raging Dragon. The Raging Dragon didn't need anyone to drive it. When it was built, Hathaway gave the magic ship a basic consciousness, turning it into a magic life. It would sail according to the designated location. Compared to the other two armed merchant ships, the living conditions on the Raging Dragon were simply heaven. The power of magic was fully displayed here. In order to store goods, food, and water, the cabins of the other two merchant ships were very cramped. On this ship, not to mention Sulen, even the guards had a room of 50 square meters. There was no shortage of various materials. Compared to the other ships, this was a luxury cruise ship. Sulen stayed on the deck. At this time, he had already opened the system's strategic map and let the strategic map record their sailing route. At the same time, it was also an opportunity to expand the strategic map. Through the strategic map, Sulen could see the surrounding scene with a radius of 30 kilometers. Sailing in the sea was not a problem for him, but it was not so easy for the other ships. If they could find some islands to stop at on this route, it would be good news for this route. Warning! Warning! A large number of hostile creatures have been detected. The target is approaching the fleet. At this time, a large number of red dots suddenly appeared on the strategic map. These dots gathered densely in one place and were quickly approaching the fleet. What's that? Sulen frowned slightly. Investigating. In the next second, a flash of light appeared on the watchtower of the Furious Dragon. Soon, some images appeared in front of them. A large number of similar monsters appeared in the images. These monsters had the head of a fish and their bodies were covered in green or blue scales. They looked ferocious and ugly, and their bodies were similar to humans. They had a thick crocodile tail behind their bodies and a dorsal fin that extended from the tail to the top of their heads. Their heads were wide and their exaggerated mouths were filled with saw-like teeth. Their limbs were strong and their fingers were covered with frog webs. Although it was the first time Sulen saw these creatures, he could recognize them at a glance. These were Sawajin, the natives of the sea. These evil creatures would attack all the creatures they saw in the water. The people who lived on the sea usually called them the demons of the sea. These Sawajin were a serious threat to the trade of the sea fleet. They were monsters that were more hated and feared by the merchants than the pirates. Soon, the guards in the cabin rushed to the deck. After seeing the Sawajin, they all pulled out their weapons. Send the signal to the merchant ships behind. Prepare for battle. Sulen looked at the Sawajin that was controlling the waves and approaching quickly. Yes, Your Majesty. A guard stepped forward and bowed. He then immediately climbed to the watchtower of the Furious Dragon and began to send the signal to the two ships behind. After receiving the signal, the two merchant ships immediately became active. All the sailors pulled out their weapons and were ready for battle. Soon, a large number of Sawajin appeared in the surrounding sea. As soon as these demons of the sea appeared, they could not wait to climb to the surrounding ships. Sulen did not attack these Sawajin. He wanted to see the strength of the sailors. Although these Sawajin looked ferocious, they were not very strong. If either Sulen or Hathaway attacked, these monsters would not last more than a breath. With him and Hathaway around, these Sawajin could not do anything. They were perfect for the sailors to sharpen their skills. After all, after forming the merchant fleet, they would often travel the sea in the future. There would be many situations like this. They would not be lucky enough to have Sulen with them every time, so they had to grow up as soon as possible. Soon, the Sawajin climbed to the deck. The well-prepared sailors immediately swung their long swords at them. The Sawajin were ferocious by nature. They would eat any creature that they caught. The sailors naturally knew their habits, so they did not hold back at all. A sailor swung his long sword. A cold light flashed, and a Sawajin that had just climbed up had its arm cut off. Then, with another swing, the Sawajin was killed. Smelly blood splattered all over the deck. Poochie. Like a water bag that was pierced, a Sawajin's body was thrown out with a flick of his wrist. The surrounding sailors cooperated with each other. The Sawajin could not climb onto the deck at all. Chapter 585. There were also a large number of Sawajin on the furious dragon ship, but they obviously chose the wrong opponent. Although there were not many guards on the ship, they were more than enough to deal with the Sawajin. Sullen's guards were all level 3 professions, and they could easily crush the Sawajin who were only level 1 or 2. Not a single Sawajin could get close. Perhaps it was because the Sawajin priest saw that the Sawajin had suffered heavy casualties, but the progress was limited. The Sawajin priest at the back could not wait any longer, and a wave of mana spread out from him. The Sawajin priest held a trident in his hand and chanted. His expression was one of madness, and the thick smell of blood in the surroundings made the Sawajin even crazier. Many Sawajin had already gone berserk. Hurricane whistled. When the last part of the chant was completed, the surrounding sea suddenly began to rise. This wave quickly approached the fleet, and it grew taller and taller. In just a few breaths, the wave had already exceeded 10 meters. The 10-meter-tall wave came crashing down on the fleet. It was obvious that the Sawajin priest wanted to sink the ship directly. However, its plan was quickly foiled. The experienced sailors skillfully maneuvered the ship so that the bow of the ship was facing the huge wave. As soon as the ship adjusted its position, the next second, the huge wave surged over. The bow of the ship suddenly sank, and in the next second, it quickly floated up, and then the entire ship was lifted by the huge wave. The wave rushed over quickly, and the ship suddenly sank. Then, it floated up again under the buoyancy of the sea. The whole process was smooth except for some bumps on the ship. The wave summoned by the Sawajin priest was easily handled by the sailors. On the furious dragon ship, Sulen looked at the operation of the 2 armed merchant ships and nodded with satisfaction. The sailors had done well in this test, and he was very satisfied. Since they had passed the test, there was no need to continue wasting time. A wave of lightning energy surged out from his body, and in the next second, countless lightning snakes appeared out of nowhere, and instantly covered the surrounding sea. The dazzling lightning flashed, and bolts of lightning fell continuously. The entire sea was covered by the power of lightning. The entire surface of the sea turned into a sea of lightning at this moment, and hundreds of Sawajin were drowned in the endless lightning. When the lightning dissipated, the entire sea surface was empty. After witnessing this miraculous power, the surrounding sailors looked at Sulen with even more reverence. After dealing with the Sawajin, the fleet continued to sail. After the battle, everyone was much more cautious. Sulen and Hathaway were also observing from the deck. There were a lot of creatures in the ocean. After sailing for some distance, a group of whales swam by not far away. People who saw such huge creatures for the first time were stunned. These huge whales had almost no natural enemies in the ocean, so they swam leisurely in the sea. As they ventured deeper into the sea, the fleet encountered many large sea monsters. Other than whales, Sulen also discovered some giant squid. The deep sea was the territory of these giant sea monsters. Most of these sea monsters had a challenge rating of 15+ and above. However, most of these sea monsters were neutral. As long as they were not provoked, they would not attack the fleet. After discovering these sea monsters, the fleet did not get too close. Sulen was not interested in these sea monsters, and Sulen only took care of them when they were in the way. Hathaway, on the other hand, was interested in some of the sea monsters. She caught them and seemed to be checking and recording them. Then, she drew their blood and collected some of their muscle tissue. She was going to bring these back for research. Many of these giant sea monsters were ancient species, so the chances of research were high. On the 5th day, the fleet encountered a storm. Fortunately, before the storm, Sulen found an island on the strategic map. The fleet arrived at the island in advance to rest and avoid the storm. A tornado that was hundreds of meters tall formed directly on the surface of the sea, forming a huge whirlpool. It was quite spectacular. If the fleet encountered any ordinary merchant ship other than the magic ship Raging Dragon, no matter if it was a warship or an armed merchant ship, it would be doomed. The fleet found an island with an area of 30 square kilometers. There were no humans living on it, only some wild beasts and seabirds. Although the island was not too big, there was fresh water on it. The trees on the island were lush, and there were various fruits. It could be used as a supply point. Su Len marked the location of the island and planned to use it as a stronghold on the trade route. On the 13th day, Su Len found another island. The island was not big, only about 10 square kilometers. Fortunately, there was also a water source on the island. What surprised Su Len was that there were people living on the island. After occupying the island, Su Len knew that these people were a group of pirates. This island was the stronghold of these pirates. Su Len directly sent people to capture all the pirates and interrogate them. When it came to pirates, the most intriguing thing was the pirates' treasure. Basically, all the famous pirate leaders had saved up a shocking amount of wealth. Most pirates would hide their treasures, and Su Len was very interested in treasure hunting. After occupying the island, Su Len began to ask these people about the surrounding shipping routes and marked them. Soon, Su Len knew the surrounding situation. After subduing these pirates, this pirate island also became an important point of the trade route. As time passed, the number of islands seemed to have increased. After sailing for 8 days, Su Len and the others finally saw the outline of the continental shelf. This place was very close to the eastern continent. Due to the warm climate of the eastern continent, this ocean could be said to be rich in resources. There were a lot of fish, lobsters, abalones, and so on. There were several lobsters alone. The most common lobsters were 3 kinds. The first was the king shrimp, which was a fierce creature. It could reach a maximum length of more than 5 meters. Its claws and teeth were sharp, and its diet was very varied. Its lower limbs were thin and strong, and it was a very fierce sea creature. The second kind was the giant lobster, which was an ordinary marine product. There were a lot of them, and the lobsters were not small. They tasted good. The last kind was called the splendid lobster, which was a very expensive lobster. It tasted the best among all the lobsters. However, the production was generally low. After arriving at this area, Su Len had people catch some lobsters of all kinds. He wanted to taste these delicacies first. Chapter 586. Now that he had decided to try it, Su Luen directly stopped the ship in this area and then went into the sea to catch some seafood himself. A 1-meter-long ornate embroidered lobster was caught. Such a big ornate embroidered lobster waved its 2 big pincers and looked very intimidating. However, it was not facing the sea creatures this time. Su Len snapped his fingers and a tiny lightning flashed. The lobster was electrocuted and twitched all over. After handing the lobster to the chef, Su Len was ready to go to the sea again. He saw a clam shell in the sea just now. Maybe there were pearls inside. The underwater world was very beautiful. Su Luen found many beautiful corals and colorful fish swimming back and forth in the corals. The coral reef was unexpectedly lively. On the surrounding rocks, there were a large number of shells, oysters, shrimps and crabs living. A few turtles the size of millstones were leisurely paddling in the water. At this time, a little blue fluorescent light flashed in the sea not far away. Soon, the fluorescent light swam over. When it got closer, it was discovered that the fluorescent light was actually a large number of jellyfish. Jellyfish were widely distributed in the sea. These beautiful creatures that looked almost transparent were very dangerous. 90% of jellyfish were highly poisonous. Although they looked beautiful, they were actually carnivorous. A large group of light blue fluorescent jellyfish appeared in front of them. There were hundreds of jellyfish in this group. The small fish around the coral reef were all scared and hid in the crevices. A few turtles that were paddling nearby immediately became spirited after seeing the large number of jellyfish. They quickly swam over. These jellyfish that were very dangerous to other creatures were the best food for the turtles. The usually slow-moving turtles quickly caught up with the jellyfish. Then, they bit down on one of the jellyfish as if they were drinking water. In an instant, more than half of the jellyfish were sucked in. Then, with another bite, the jellyfish was eaten by the turtles. The group of jellyfish that were showing off suddenly panicked. Hundreds of jellyfish fled in panic under the onslaught of the turtles. Sulen watched for a while and lost interest. He was going to look around for the giant clams. The pearls of the Eastern Sea were very popular in the Western continent. These pearls were not only beautiful, but also had magic power. They were important materials for enchantment. The most precious one was a kind of pearl called mermaid pearl. It was said that this pearl could only be cultivated by mermaids in the Eastern continent. It was very rare and very precious. Sulen quickly found a giant clam in the sea. The giant clam seemed to feel danger and closed its shell tightly. Sulen gently knocked on the clam's shell. The clam's shell was as hard as iron. A flash of lightning flashed on Sulen's hand, and then it instantly disappeared to enter the shell. A burst of thunder and lightning sounded. Soon, a gap opened up on the clam's shell. The thunder and lightning just now had paralyzed the giant clam's body. Sulen easily opened the clam's shell. A pearl swayed slightly in the clam's shell. The pearl had a diameter of 10 centimeters, and its color was light blue. It was very beautiful. Sulen directly took out the pearl. After taking out the pearl, Sulen let go of the giant clam and then looked around for more clams. When Hathaway called him for lunch, he had already found more than 10 pearls. However, other than the first pearl, the rest of the pearls were not big. Lunch was very sumptuous. The chef that Sulen brought this time was the best student of the halfling Frodo. His cooking skills were very good. The 1-meter-long splendid brocade lobster was made into a full lobster feast. The crystal-clear lobster meat was neatly cut on the plate, and there was a layer of ice below. The ice was emitting a faint chill, which made the lobster meat even more chewy. Together with the carefully prepared dipping sauce, the lobster meat was delicious. Of course, other than this way of eating, there was also a serving of stir-fried lobster meat. The lobster meat was stir-fried with onion, bell pepper, and pepper. Every bite was blissful. On the side, there was also a serving of lobster soup. The lobster meat was braised with some seaweed. It was delicious. After enjoying the delicious meal, Sulen gave the pearls that he had just collected to Hathaway. After seeing the big pearl that was more than 10 centimeters long, Hathaway's eyes lit up. She could not wait to snatch the pearl. "It's so beautiful. Is there more?" Hathaway asked while holding the big pearl with both hands. "There are still some small pearls. If you like them, you can have them all." Sulen took out the rest of the pearls and gave them to Hathaway. "By the way, Sulen, did you find the magic pearl clam below?" Hathaway suddenly asked. "The magic pearl clam? I didn't see it." Sulen shrugged. "It's hard to find that thing." "Oh." Hathaway looked disappointed. "I remember that the magic pearl clam is the product of the ancient arcanist's transformation. If you want it, you can try to cultivate it." Sulen said, "We can open up a water area in the wizard tower to cultivate the magic pearl clam. That's worth a try." Hathaway thought for a moment and nodded in agreement. Then the two went into the sea again and searched for many different kinds of shells and clams. Then they opened up a room on the Furious Dragon, poured seawater into it, and put the clams in. Under the effect of magic, the environment here would be the same as the ocean, and the giant clams could live normally in it. The ancient wizards carried out some bloodline transformation experiments. These experiments were developed to the peak during the Witch King era. But after the Witch King era was destroyed, there were fewer such experiments. The Arcane Empire also did a lot of research on bloodline transformation experiments. I'm going to try to transform a magic pearl clam. Well, if the transformation is successful, we can continue to get the magic pearl clam. If you need anything, I'll ask someone to find it. Sulen nodded and said. The most successful example of bloodline transformation was the warlocks. Hathaway's idea of transforming the magic pearl clam was not whimsical. There was a creature that was very successful in bloodline transformation in the North Town, the Crystal Beast. The Crystal Beast was originally just an ordinary beast. It might swallow rocks to increase the hardness of its scales, but it would not produce crystals. It was the product of the Arcanist's bloodline transformation. Similar creatures were the mining worm, the metal eater, and so on. It was difficult to transform a kind of magic pearl clam out of thin air, but it was much easier to do research when there was a complete information. Moreover, the transformation of the magic pearl clam was much easier than that of the crystal beast. In modern terms, the Witch King era was a time when biological modification technology was very important. During the Witch King era, every powerful wizard controlled a country. They were called Witch Kings. The country controlled by a Witch King usually lasted for hundreds or even thousands of years until the Witch King died. In the Witch King era, the wizards were very powerful, but their skills were skewed. They put too much energy into biological bloodline transformation technology. In the end, the Witch King era did not enter the Interstellar era. Of course, part of the reason was that the Witch King era was interrupted by the Arcane Empire. It was unknown if the Witch King era could enter the Interstellar era without the Arcane Empire's interruption. Of course, the feasibility was very low. The Witch King era was very rigid, and technological progress was slow. Sulen estimated that even after a few thousand years, the Witch King era could not enter the Interstellar era. The biological bloodline transformation technology was still very advanced, and it was also studied during the Arcane Empire. The Beast Men were the products of the Arcane Empire. During the Arcane Empire, the Arcanists had almost no respect for life, and in the end, they even regarded themselves as gods. There were even many Arcanists who would create intelligent life by themselves. They carefully cultivated it through genetic transformation technology, and then used enlightenment to unlock the intelligence of the finished product. After confirming that the product had the ability to reproduce, it was basically a success. However, this kind of modified creature was not screened by nature. Without other interference, it was easy to be eliminated by nature, such as reproductive degradation, natural enemies, environmental adaptation, genetic defects, and so on. Most of the intelligent creatures created by the Arcanists had gone extinct. Only a small number of them had slowly reproduced after natural evolution. Of course, the intelligent creatures created in this way were far from comparable to human beings. The reason why human beings could reproduce and prosper in the multiverse, in addition to their strong reproductive ability, the most important thing was that their brain structure was excellent. Basically, all intelligent creatures that could really reproduce a civilization had a better brain structure than other life forms. After staying in the sea for a day, the fleet set off again. In fact, the fleet was not far from the eastern continent. Along the way, Sulen used the strategic map to draw a more complete nautical chart. At the same time, the route was also marked. The surrounding islands, sea monsters, reefs, and ocean currents were also marked. According to the route on the nautical chart, they could sail to the eastern continent. After sailing for a few more days, the fleet finally approached the eastern continent. In the distance, the withered earth appeared, the towering mountains rose and fell, and the wind rolled up sand and dust to cover the sky. Sulen did not need to be close to know that the environment here was very bad. The eastern continent was severely damaged in the war. Nearly half of the originally fertile continent had become desert. Even after thousands of years, the environment here was still very bad. The eastern continent was 4 to 5 times the size of the western continent, but the population here was only half of that of the western continent. Most of the population here was concentrated in the southern plains and coastal areas. The other areas had a very bad environment and were not suitable for living. The fleet continued to sail south along the coastline. After about 2 days of sailing, other ships began to appear on the surrounding sea, indicating that they had arrived at a busy shipping route and were very close to the nearest port. When the sun rose again, a lighthouse appeared on the distant coastline. They had arrived at their destination this time. Chapter 587. A huge port appeared in front of them. A large number of merchant ships were constantly entering and exiting the port, and the whole port looked very busy. As soon as Sullen's fleet approached the port, a small boat came to guide them. Following the small boat, the 3 ships soon docked at the berth. After arriving at the port, the manager of the caravan immediately went to negotiate with the port personnel. As one of the most frequent ports with the western continent, the various procedures of Salt City Harbor were handled very quickly. After paying taxes on the goods transported this time, the fleet could find someone to unload the goods and trade. Sulan did not trade directly. It was his first time coming to Salt City Harbor. He was not clear about the prices here, so it was best to observe first before making a decision. At the same time, Sulan came to open up a new channel, so he needed to negotiate with the manager of this port. Of course, these worlds were in charge of professionals. Sulan did not need to come forward. After handing over the matter to the officials who came with him this time, Sulan took Hathaway to visit the city. Sulan and Hathaway kept looking at the surrounding environment. This was an unusually prosperous port city with a permanent population estimated to be more than 200,000. A large ship was docked at the dock, and thousands of coolies were transporting goods. The surrounding people's clothes were very different from those of the western continent. A large number of armed warriors could be seen everywhere. Hathaway went straight in after seeing a magic shop. Her purpose this time was to buy various magic materials produced in the eastern continent. Although there were many places in the eastern continent with harsh environments, some good magic materials were often produced in these areas. This Salt City Harbor first rose because of salt drying. Later, it prospered because of trade with the western continent. The buildings here also integrated the characteristics of the two civilizations. Sulan and Hathaway spent a day touring the city, and at the same time bought a lot of specialties here. The officials of Deepwater City also had a discussion with the officials of Salt City Harbor about the opening of a new channel and finally reached a cooperation. With official support, this channel would develop more smoothly in the early stages. When the merchants found out that this trade route could make a lot of money, they would be like sharks that smelled blood, flocking to it. Salt City Harbor also had a wizard organization. Such a bustling commercial port could bring in a lot of money every day. This was impossible for the wizards who were always short of money to give up. Unlike the western continent, the cities in the eastern continent were highly autonomous. The cities would form a loose alliance. There were not many countries on this continent. Many cities were controlled by monasteries or wizard organizations. The business atmosphere here was more prosperous than the western continent. After learning about the wizard organization behind this city, Sulan and Hathaway went to visit. The wizard organization in this city was very surprised that a legendary wizard came to visit. Then, they warmly welcomed them. The great wizard of the city's wizard organization personally welcomed them. What surprised Suran and Hathaway was that this great wizard was also a legendary wizard. But thinking about it, if it weren't for his great power, they wouldn't have been able to occupy this treasured land. After all, the annual income of this Salt City Harbor could be converted into millions or even tens of millions of gold nars. The income of this city was almost equal to the income of a kingdom of Florence. The area of Salt City Harbor was very large. There were also a lot of farmland around the city. In addition to the population of the city, there were a lot of towns and villages around the city. The surrounding resources were all used to support the development of this harbor. Sulen and Hathaway had a discussion with the wizard organization in Salt Lake City. At the same time, the two sides also exchanged some knowledge. Of course, the knowledge exchanged was not very precious, but it was still not bad. This knowledge would also play a big role in the North Wind Tower. After completing the knowledge exchange, the two sides had a discussion. It was good for wizards to communicate frequently. Sometimes, when an experiment was difficult, they would often get inspiration from the exchange. Unfortunately, the wizard organization did not open the library to Sulen and Hathaway, which disappointed Sulen. However, the exchange of materials was still very good. Sulen used some of the materials produced in the Northern Secret Realm to exchange for a lot of magic materials produced in the Eastern Continent. Although they did not have access to the library, they could enter the Salt Lake City Library at will. Of course, the library in Salt Lake City did not store much wizard knowledge. There were a lot of history books and some myths and legends, as well as poetry and some literary works. Sulen was very interested in the history and mythology books here. History books could let them understand the evolution of the civilization in the Eastern Continent, as well as some major events. As for myths and legends, although there were many exaggerated rhetoric, many myths and legends were actually related to wizards. In terms of history, there were many differences between this place and the Western Continent. Before the period of the Arcane Empire, this place was called the Dark Age. The entire Eastern Continent at that time did not have so many deserts and dangerous environments. On the contrary, there was plenty of rain, fertile land, and rich products. It was a prosperous continent. At that time, the kingdom that ruled this place practiced blood sacrifice. The god that they believed in should be the god that was born here. Every blood sacrifice would kill thousands of slaves. This cruel blood sacrifice quickly led to a rebellion and was eventually overthrown by the wizards. The god who accepted the blood sacrifice was eventually defeated by the Arcanists. Because the native god accepted the blood sacrifice, he had long been eroded by the power of the blood sacrifice and became crazy. In addition to these, Sulen also found some places where monsters were sealed. However, most of these places were monasteries of monks. These monasteries were there to suppress the monsters. Sulen found some familiar monsters from these myths and legends, such as the demigod mummy, the dream chrysalis, and other ancient evil creatures. One of the ancient books also drew an ancient pyramid with a creature with wings that looked like a snake or a dragon. Sulen recognized it at a glance. It was a Quetzalcoatl. The Quetzalcoatl was a powerful divine creature. Their challenge level was similar to that of the dragons, but they were rare. Since the beginning of the Arcane Empire, the Quetzalcoatl rarely appeared. Similar to them was the Eastern Condor. The Eastern Condor was a powerful creature that served the ancient god, the Sun God. After the fall of the Sun God, it went to the legendary Eagle Mountain and no longer served the resurrected King of Dawn. Chapter 588. Sulen opened the book and looked at it. The book recorded a race that had disappeared. There were many buildings left by this race in the book. These buildings gave Sulen a feeling that they were similar to the Mayan civilization in his previous life. The same worship of blood sacrifice, the same style of architecture, and the same gods were believed in. The book in front of him had a strange totem pole with an unknown god on it. The whole totem pole was covered with blood, and blood seemed to have seeped into it in many places. Under the totem pole were countless slaves who had been killed. These slaves were beheaded, and their blood flowed on the pyramid. The gaps of the pyramid seemed to have been filled with blood, and under the pyramid, a large number of humans in simple clothes like primitive people were constantly kneeling. There was also the symbol of wind and rain on the totem pole, which meant that they believed in a rain god. There were no written records of the rain god on other continents, but in this civilization, it was very revered. It symbolized the harvest. From ancient times to the present, people had always been in awe of the gods who were in charge of the harvest. Sulen was not very interested in these gods. These gods who had accepted the blood sacrifice did not end well. According to the division of the arcane kingdom, these gods belonged to the nature gods. There was no good or evil, and they were very susceptible to the influence of believers. These gods had a high chance of becoming evil gods. Now, the gods recorded in these libraries were likely to have become evil gods. In addition to these materials, there were also records of many disasters and various monsters that happened in ancient times. After looking at some more, Sulen found that these monsters seemed to be the ancient evil that had been sealed. It seemed that although these mortals did not know the origin of these monsters, it did not prevent them from recording these disasters. However, these records had now been regarded as myths by ordinary people. Sulen still got a lot of useful information from these stories, such as where these monsters were killed or defeated. Combined with the map, it was easy to find the approximate location of these monsters that were sealed. In addition to these, there were also many ruins of ancient cities, but it was not known what these ruins had left after thousands of years. Because the main purpose of this trip to the eastern continent was to open up new shipping routes and trade, Sulen did not go to these places to search. Searching for ruins sometimes depended on luck. If they were lucky, they could just dig a hole. If they were unlucky, it was not unusual to spend a year and a half. After staying in the library for 2 days, the fleet also completed the transaction during this time and was ready to return with various goods from Salt City Port. Most of the goods they purchased from the eastern continent this time were tea leaves, cotton, silk, porcelain, spices, pearls, and some enchanted materials. According to the calculations of the manager of the caravan, the profits of this trip were between 200,000 to 250,000 gold nars. Originally, Hathaway wanted to purchase some mermaid pearls, but there were no mermaids living in Salt City Port. Of the sea pearls were only produced in small quantities in the southern part of the continent. After all, mermen were too few in number. Because of the hydrological environment and other factors, the eastern continent was rich in pearls, and the quality was better than the pearls in the western continent. Although they did not buy any mermaid pearls, they purchased a large number of pearls this time, and some of them were magical pearls. Low to medium quality magical pearls could purify some potions, remove the side effects of potions, or neutralize toxins. High-quality magical pearls could be used to make magical items, rare-grade equipment, and could also be used to store spells. They were very popular among wizards. There were also a lot of silk in the eastern continent. It was also the best silk production area besides the elves. After all, the elven forest had been closed for more than 1,000 years. The number of half-elves was too small, and the production of silk was limited. Many silk were sold from the eastern continent, and of course, some were sold by the drows in the underground world. However, the drows sold silk stockings more often. Almost all the nobles went crazy for them. Even the witches could not resist the temptation of silk stockings. This thing was expensive. On the surface world was very hostile to the drows and claimed to cut off all trade with them. However, most of them were just words. It was easy to know if they were trading with the underground world. Just look at the women and see if they were wearing silk stockings. In addition to these, 5 of the people who came this time stayed in Salt City Harbor to build a warehouse. The warehouse would buy materials from Salt City Steel, and at the same time, sell various materials from Northern City. Northern City's paper, purple crystal honey, and white sugar were very popular here. The sales of vodka could only be said to be average, but the sales of rum were not bad. Purple crystal honey was the most popular. The wizard organization in Salt City Port directly expressed that they wanted to buy all the purple crystal honey. Although Su Len was tempted, he still rejected them. After all, the warehouse in Salt Lake City still needed money and honey to make a name for itself. There were still many advantages to building a warehouse in Salt Lake Port. When the fleet came again, they could directly transport it back to the mainland. This way, a lot of time could be saved, and at the same time, they could also collect information about the eastern continent. It took a few days for the fleet to complete the supplies and set sail again. This time, in addition to the 3 ships from Deepwater City, Salt City Port also sent 2 armed merchant ships to follow. These people were going to Deepwater City to trade. At the same time, they also planned to build a warehouse in Deepwater City. The return journey was slower than before. After all, when they came, the wind was with them, but now it was against them. Fortunately, the sailing technology of this era was very good. They could still sail against the wind, but the return journey was much slower than when they were with the wind. The 5 ships were lucky this time. They did not encounter those Sawajan. It was also possible that they were badly damaged in the last battle and could not continue to live here. The Sawajan also had many enemies in the sea. Once they declined, their enemies would not let go of this good opportunity. There were also a large number of intelligent races living in the sea. They must be the Kotao Sawajan, mermaids, Naga, Sawajan, sirens, and so on. These races were not friendly and harmonious with each other. In the depths of the sea, there were also some extremely terrifying sea monsters, and even the children of Dagon. Dagon was also a very dangerous creature. Even the gods were afraid of him. He represented evil, chaos, madness, and blasphemy. It was said that his existence could be traced back to the time of the ancient gods. He was a very powerful and evil creature. He was one of the most powerful demon lords. He was known as the King of the Deep, the god of sea monsters, the shadow of the ocean, and was the nemesis of the god of the sea. Dagon was not a name that was fixed in stone. According to the research of wizards, Dagon was originally a subordinate of an ancient god. This name was more like a title, and only the most powerful of them could be called Dagon. It looked like a creature mixed with fish, mollusks, and eels. Although Dagon was evil, chaotic, and very dangerous, there were still his cult in the coastal area. Many pirates believed in this creature. Legend said that a pirate leader was favored by him and became his follower. He gained great power and the ability to command sea monsters. However, this ability came at a great cost. Dagon's power would change the appearance of humans and make them look like sea monsters. For example, they would grow tentacles like an octopus, or shells like mollusks, sharp claws, and so on. Because they accepted Dagon's power, they would be ostracized by other gods. They would never be able to land and could only drift in the sea forever. Even so, there were still people who were willing to accept Dagon's power. On many islands, many indigenous savages still worshipped Dagon as a god. This worship had lasted for thousands of years. The current Dagon lived in the dark sea of the bottomless abyss. In the records left by the sorcerers, this powerful demon lord was recorded. Some natives would mate with other creatures, mainly swamp giants and half-fish creatures, in order to obtain rich fish and rare treasures. They believed that this ritual could give their offspring great power. Of course, not all sea monsters believed in Dagon. The ancient arcanists had studied and classified the sea monsters. They could be roughly divided into several types. The first type was the tentacle-type sea monsters. These sea monsters looked like giant octopuses. Most of them were Dagon's followers. The second type was the fish-type sea monsters, such as the dragon whale, giant kraken, dragon turtle, and so on. These sea monsters were special demigods. They were neutral sea monsters. Under normal circumstances, as long as you did not get close to them, they would not take the initiative to attack. The third type was the multi-headed sea monsters. The most representative of these was the Hydra. These sea monsters were usually the servants of the goddess of the ocean. The fourth type of sea monster was the dinosaur. This sea monster originated from the father of dinosaurs. This powerful god created a giant beast to expand his power into the sea. This monster was also called the Abomination. The fleet repaired and replenished some water on the islands marked by Sulen before they continued to sail in the direction of the deep water port. Sulen had decided to send people to build transit stations on the islands when they returned. These stations would provide water and food for the fleet and shelter the ships from storms. After all, apart from pirates and sea monsters, the biggest risk of sailing at sea was getting lost, storms, and other shipwrecks. With these islands, they could at least provide a shelter for the fleet in the event of a storm. This would reduce the occurrence of shipwrecks. This was very important for maritime trade. In this era, there was almost a 1/5 chance of losing one's life. Every time they went out to sea, they would be prepared for the worst. Sailors in this era were brave men. They returned to the deep water port without a hitch. At this time, it had been more than 2 months since the fleet left. Deepwater City had also undergone tremendous changes. Chapter 589. Deepwater City. Since the last time they left, it had completely changed. The original wooden fences had been replaced by bricks. The city wall was about 8 meters high and 6 meters thick. There were also arrow towers built on top of it, which were used to guard against pirates. There was an arrow tower every 20 meters on the city wall. The scale of the whole city was comparable to a medium-sized city. The residents here had reached more than 30,000 people, and there were even more kobolds and goblin slaves. The whole city was very busy. The east gate of the city was facing the port. It was about 1 kilometer away from the port to the city. The road connecting the port and the city was paved with bluestone. It was 8 meters wide, and there were drainage canals on both sides of the road. Teams of patrolling soldiers were patrolling back and forth, and there were even some half-elf archers among them. This surprised the people of Salt City Harbor. The half-elves were also a very xenophobic race. In the beginning, the half-elves were discriminated against by both elves and humans. This led to the half-elves only being close to each other for warmth. They were not close to other races, and it was not easy to hire them. Mu Sun looked at Sulen with eyes full of surprise. Originally, in their view, this so-called deepwater port should be just a small city. They came here because of Hathaway, the legendary witch. They did not have much hope for Deepwater City. Their original plan was to set up a warehouse and send a few ships every year to buy some paper, white sugar, and purple crystal honey back. They did not expect to be shocked by the scene in front of them as soon as they arrived. The wide port, the flat road, and the elite soldiers. Although the city was still a bit simple, it looked lively. After entering the city, Musun found that the city was so neat and clean. The streets were straight and flat, and there was no debris on the ground. The scene of sewage and feces in other cities did not happen. It could be said that this was the cleanest city he had ever seen. There were neat houses on both sides of the street. The style of the houses was almost identical. Although they did not look exquisite, they were durable and easy to build. There were many pedestrians on the street, but there was no congestion. The pedestrians all walked to the right. Just as they walked into the city, several people who looked like officials hurried over. When they came close, they immediately bowed respectfully and said, "Your Majesty, welcome back. Get up." Sulen waved his hand to let Holland come over. He then pointed to Musun next to him and said, "This is the steward sent by Salt City Harbor. We have reached an agreement with Salt City Harbor to officially open the channel. They will set up an office here. You have to communicate more about the business in the future." "Yes, Your Majesty." Holland nodded and agreed. I'll leave the rest to you. After a brief introduction, Su Luan left with Hathaway. Now that the city's route had been opened, the rest of the things were left to them. Su Len then patrolled Deepwater City. The construction of the city was progressing very quickly. Carts of bricks and tiles were transported from the west gate. The surrounding land had been divided and was full of busy craftsmen. There were also well-equipped soldiers patrolling around. A large number of kobolds, goblins, and gnolls were working under whips. On the island in the middle of the river outside the city, warships and armed merchant ships were under construction in the shipyard. According to Sullen's requirements, the fleet of Deepwater Port needed at least 12 merchant ships. Half of them would be used for the eastern route, and the other half would be used for the southern route. At the same time, the city's navy needed to be completed as soon as possible. In the south of the city was a newly opened farmland. Some crops would be planted here to maintain the food supply of Deepwater City. In fact, the land here was not fertile. It was close to the sea, so the farmland was not suitable for farming. The first year's harvest would be poor, so it needed high-quality fertilizer. Not far away, a fertilizer processing plant had been built. All the feces in the city had been sent here to be fermented. At the same time, 3 fishing boats went out to sea to catch fish and replenish their food supply. Deepwater Port could now replenish some of the food consumption. After patrolling the city, Su Len and Hathaway returned to Northwind Tower with the various enchanted items they had bought from the eastern continent. A teleportation light descended from the sky, and Su Len and Hathaway appeared on the astrology platform. It took more than 2 months to travel to the eastern continent. Hathaway had accumulated many experimental projects to complete. After saying goodbye to Su Len, she hurriedly left. Just as Su Len was about to check on the northern city, Chris came into the room. Su Len, let me tell you a piece of good news. Alex has successfully advanced. Chris was very happy to see Su Len return. Alex has advanced? Su Len was pleasantly surprised. The northern city now had 3 legendary figures, Su Len, Hathaway, and Chris. Now, there was Alex. If you only counted the top fighters, the northern city could easily beat some small countries. Furthermore, another important reason why Alex had successfully advanced to the legendary rank was that he could now prepare to construct the Northwind Tower's mystery. Hathaway had already studied the puzzle thoroughly. The reason why the northern city had not built it was because they did not have enough manpower. A large puzzle required the cooperation of at least 3 legendary wizards. Although the northern city had 3 legendary figures, Hathaway was the only one who was a proper wizard. Su Len and Chris were both a warrior and a succubus sorcerer. Although they could cast spells, they were still far from being a proper wizard. Alex and Chris were different. Alex was also a wizard and a sorcerer. He did not rely on the power of his bloodline to become a legendary sorcerer. Instead, he relied on his wizard profession to become a legendary sorcerer. Otherwise, with her qualifications, she would have already advanced. After all, she had divine energy in her body. Now that Alex had become a legend, it was the same as having 2 legendary wizards. Although Surin and Chris weren't legendary wizards yet, the 2 of them together were barely enough. Great, let her prepare. We will build the puzzle of the Northwind Tower together, Su Len said excitedly. Hathaway has already prepared all the information. Take a look at it. When the time comes, you'll need our cooperation. Don't worry, I will prepare these. Chris nodded and took the information. Riddles were learned by the ancient arcanists from the High Elves. At first, the human riddles could only cover a radius of 200 meters, but the elves' riddles could easily cover the entire city. The elves' riddles were very powerful because they had the help of the elven gods. The human puzzle waited until the end of the Silver Age, when the emergence of the mice energy nucleus achieved an explosive breakthrough. Since then, the human puzzle technology could be relied on to the floating city and became an indispensable defensive rune. The puzzle also underwent rapid development during the Arcane Empire. It was said that when the Arcane Empire was at its peak, the puzzle of the floating city had been upgraded to an artificial magic net. With the artificial magic net technology, ordinary people in the floating city could also cast some low-level spells. The artificial magic net was made by imitating the magic net woven by the goddess of magic. Of course, it could not be compared with the magic net of the goddess of magic that covered the whole world. The artificial magic net could usually only cover an area of more than 10 square kilometers, which was usually slightly larger than a floating city. The puzzle that Sulan and Hathaway intended to weave was not that big. It mainly covered the range of the Tower of the North Wind. After all, the bigger the puzzle, the more energy it would need to consume. When he saw Alex again, Sulan's eyes lit up. After successfully advancing to the legendary realm, Alex's appearance had also undergone some slight changes. At the same time, after advancing to the legendary realm, her bloodline had also advanced. After completely integrating with the divinity, she had now become more beautiful and had a noble and holy aura. She was wearing a pure white dress with gorgeous patterns embroidered with silver silk thread on the cuffs. The silk thread simply outlined a few strokes on the dress, but it outlined a bellflower, which was very vivid. Her wine-red hair draped over her shoulders, and she wore an exquisite crown on her head. She had a slender waist, a full and plump buttocks, and a pair of long and slender legs that were far more beautiful than the average person's. The pair of wings on her back had been put away, and she looked like a goddess who had fallen into the mortal world. Her delicate facial features, beautiful face, and elegant temperament made Sulan feel that she was even more beautiful than before. Congratulations on successfully stepping into the legendary realm, Sulan said with a smile. Sulan. Alex's beautiful face smiled like a blooming flower. She stepped forward and gave Sulan a warm hug. Her white hands gently wrapped around Sulan's neck, and she tiptoed and gently kissed his forehead. My king, thank you for your help. If you hadn't brought me out of the underground world and provided me with all kinds of resources and even divinity, I wouldn't have been able to reach where I am today. Feeling the warmth on his forehead, Sulan smiled and said, the resources I provided were only a part of it. The main reason is your own hard work. However, you slacked off after advancing to the legendary realm. You must know that the legendary realm is only the beginning of the real world. I know. Don't worry, I will catch up with you as soon as possible, Alex said affectionately. By the way, I have all the information about the puzzle that Sister Hathaway prepared. When do you think we should start weaving the puzzle? In the next few days, there are some other preparations to be done. When Hathaway is ready, we will start, Sulan said. Chapter 590. In the North Wind Tower, Sulan was looking through the information on elemental fission. The principle of elemental fission was not too difficult. He had almost finished the research. The theory was already mature, and he only needed to put it into practice. Even the theory of elemental fusion reaction had been successful. However, because elemental fission required high strength of materials, Sulan was a little hesitant. Elemental fission reaction would release unimaginable energy. If the elemental fission furnace was not strong enough, or if the elemental fission reaction was too fast, it was likely to cause a violent explosion. If elemental fission explosion occurred, the power could be said to be far more powerful than a level 9 spell, so he had to be careful. Making elemental fission furnace required a lot of materials from the astral world. Fortunately, Sulan and Hathaway had collected a lot of materials in the astral world. It was enough. Elemental fission furnaces were usually used on floating space towers. Although the elemental pool could also support the floating space tower, at this point, the elemental pool needed to accumulate enough energy to support the floating space tower for a period of time. Only the elemental fission furnace could support the floating space tower for a long time to fight in the air. Last time, he got an intact floating space ring. With the information left in the wizard tower, the technology of the floating space ring was completely understood. As long as he had the materials, he could produce it. In addition to the special materials of the floating space ring, the most important thing was the 28 types of anti-gravity runes inscribed on it. These runes were the crystallization of the command during the Arcane Empire era. Only such a carefully made floating space ring could support the wizard tower, which weighed thousands of tons. Master, the elemental pool of the wizard tower is full of energy, Tower Spirit Een suddenly said while Sulan was thinking. Sulan stopped thinking. It was useless to think too much now. He had to do the thing in front of him first. The elemental pool was full of energy. He could consider weaving the puzzle. On the astrology platform, Sulan, Hathaway, Chrissy, and Alex stood in the center with serious faces. Phyllis, Sandy, Karina, Angela, and Anna stood not far away. Several other wizards of the wizard tower were all there. They looked at Sulan and the others with excitement. They were looking forward to what would happen next. Let's start. Sulan asked. Begin. Hathaway nodded and said. Hathaway walked to the center of the astrology platform and waved the staff in her hand. Milky Way, prepare to activate the energy connection channel. Light blue elemental energy gushed out from the elemental pool, and the entire runic magic circle slowly lit up. In the center of the runic magic circle, an engraved puzzle core slowly lit up. A large number of runes were engraved on the core of the mystery lock. Under the influence of this enormous energy, each of them seemed to be alive as they spun rapidly. The huge drop of energy was activated, and the whole floating city shook slightly. The estimated powerful energy wave spread quickly from the wizard tower to the surroundings. At the bottom of the Adept's tower, multiple energy channels formed by magic crystals quickly connected with the surrounding ley network. The ground energy of the entire northern citadel area began to converge towards the Adept's tower. As the elemental energy kept fluctuating, the surrounding elemental energy kept flowing towards the wizard tower. Soon, the concentration of elemental energy in the wizard tower doubled. Activate the elemental pool. Activate Earth Vein Network. Begin energy materialization. As the orders were given, the entire wizard tower was soon surrounded by an energy siphon. At the top of the wizard tower, an elemental siphon like a whirlpool reached all the way to the sky. A huge amount of energy kept converging there. At this moment, the whole sky had already darkened. Countless lightning bolts were swimming in the sky. Sulan, Chris, and Alex stood around each other. Powerful elemental energy was gathering around them. Prepare to weave the mystery lock. At this moment, Hathaway suddenly ordered. Magic reshape. Surin's team of 3 promptly took action. Next, powerful streams of mana surged out from their bodies. Thanks to their power, the originally chaotic streams of mana began reorganizing themselves. Strands of magic appeared in midair. These strands were completely formed by energy. Hathaway gently waved her staff, and runes quickly appeared. As soon as these runes appeared, they began to entangle with each other. Soon, a strange runic circle appeared in front of them. Magic weave. Under Hathaway's command, strands of magic strands quickly crisscrossed. At the same time, runes were constantly imprinted on the strands of magic strands. In just a few breaths, a fishnet-like mystery lock appeared in front of them. As the mystery lock continued to weave, the surrounding elemental energy was constantly absorbed by the mystery lock. The strands of magic strands formed by magic energy were quickly weaved under the effect of those strange runes. After these runes were completely formed by energy, they formed a huge network. This network quickly expanded as Hathaway and the others continued to weave. Soon, this huge network enveloped the entire wizard tower. The light blue mystery lock network lit up the sky of Northgard City. Hathaway's silhouette had already flown into the sky, her gorgeous magus robe fluttering in the wind due to the rich elemental energy. All the runes were linked to her body, and then like a spider web, they kept spreading in all directions. Under the Magus Tower, a large number of runes were engraved on countless magic crystals, and at this moment, they were also linked to the runes in the sky. So beautiful. Xanthi looked at the layers of blue network in the sky, and her eyes sparkled. Karina looked at the network in the sky with a mesmerized expression. As a wizard, she could clearly feel the power of this power. The elemental energy that was originally like a runaway horse was suddenly bound by the huge energy network in the sky. Those wild horses were quickly tamed, and one by one, they moved according to the command of the leader horse. Gray stood on the astrology platform and looked at Sulen, Hathaway, and the others in shock. That energy network had shocked her. How powerful was this power? This is the power of a god. When it came to the Mystery Lock network, the stronger one's spellcasting ability was, the more deeply they could feel it. Being in the range of this network, they felt like they were little insects that had fallen into a spider web. The stronger one was, the more they could feel the restriction of this Mystery Lock network. Layers of the magic network were quickly woven, and the entire network extended outwards with the Wizard Tower as the core. The surrounding elemental energy was slowly bound. In the end, the entire Northgard city was covered by the magic network. On the astrology platform, Hathaway slowly descended from the sky. After the Mystery Lock network in the sky was completed, it slowly merged into the surrounding space and disappeared. Although it couldn't be seen with the naked eye, the power from the Mystery Lock network had covered the area. In essence, the Mystery Lock network was originally unrestrained elemental energy arranged in frames according to certain rules. The Mystery Lock weaved by runes covered the surrounding space, and the energy in the area was also controlled by the Mystery Lock network. The originally unruly elemental energy was now very obedient. It was easy to command it, and the difficulty of casting spells had been greatly reduced. In this area, all the elemental energy was controlled by the Mystery Lock network. No one could control the energy to cast spells. The Mystery Lock network covered an area of 10 kilometers with the Wizard Tower as the center. The scale of this Mystery Lock network could only be considered a medium-sized mystery lock. During the ancient Arcana Empire, the Mystery Lock network of the floating city could easily cover hundreds of square kilometers. That kind of large-scale Mystery Lock network had unbelievable power. The surrounding energy waves slowly calmed down, and the huge elemental siphon disappeared. The power of the Mystery Lock network slowly retracted, and finally returned to the Wizard Tower. The light blue elemental energy slowly dissipated, and finally, a layer of energy barrier like a translucent eggshell covered the entire Wizard Tower. After the hard work of Hathaway, Sulen, and the others, the Mystery Lock network of the Northwind Tower was finally completed. At this time, the Mystery Lock network did not have many functions, and it would need to be constantly added in the future. The entire Mystery Lock network cost about 20 million kinnars worth of materials, which directly emptied half of the Northgard city's wealth. If all the functions of the Mystery Lock network were to be perfected, it would cost an estimated 50 million kinnars worth of materials. Building the Mystery Lock required more than just kinnars worth of materials. There were many rare materials that Kinnar could not buy. If Sulen had not obtained a lot of benefits during this period, he would not have been able to build such a large-scale legendary rune. However, a legendary rune like the Mystery Lock network was indispensable because its effect was too powerful. As long as one was in the range of the Mystery Lock network, the Mystery Lock network's effect would be enhanced. The Mystery Lock network was the home field of the Arcanists. Its effect was similar to that of the Gods' Kingdom of the Gods. Of course, compared to the Gods' Kingdom of the Gods, the Mystery Lock network was far inferior. Of course, if the Mystery Lock network could be mounted on the floating city and supported by the Mice Energy Nucleus, it would basically be comparable to the Gods' Kingdom of the Gods with intermediate divine power. According to the division of the Arcane Empire, the strength of a great Arcanist with a top-level floating city was close to that of an intermediate divine power. Of course, there were still some differences in the specific strength. Looking at the mystery lock in front of him, Sulan's heart was full of joy. After the mystery lock was completed, Sulan also obtained the authority of the mystery lock. A huge amount of elemental power entered Sulan's body from the mystery lock. Sulan's wizard profession, which had reached grade 4, began to improve in an instant. A little light flashed in his soul from between his eyebrows, and then his whole soul quickly transformed. His originally powerful soul became even stronger. A strange energy was integrated into Sulan's body. After a while, Sulan slowly opened his eyes. A flash of lightning flashed in the depths of his eyes and then disappeared. After completing the weaving of the mystery lock, Sulan successfully advanced into a legendary wizard with the help of the mystery lock's feedback. Chapter 591. The enigma of the Tower of the North Wind was not complete. Only the basic part was completed. The complete enigma had 4 effects. The first was the enchantment. The enigma had a strong protective enchantment that was used to protect the area inside the enigma from external damage. The second was the spell sequence. This part of the spell was stored in the enigma. As long as one became a wizard and obtained the authority of the enigma, they could use it. Of course, there was a limit to the number of times they could use it. After all, the energy in the enigma was limited. Not everyone could use it at will. However, Sulan and Hathaway were not restricted at all. The third was the anti-magic field. The enigma relied on the control of elemental energy to achieve the effect of anti-magic. However, the power of the enigma was limited and could only stop low-grade wizards. The fourth was the enchantment effect. This enchantment could be used to enchant creatures within the enigma. This enchantment effect could be used once every 24 hours. The fifth type was the permanent effect. For example, the creator of the mystery lock had set up the permanent effect to banish every evil otherworldly being that entered the mystery lock. As long as an evil otherworldly being entered the mystery lock, the permanent effect would be triggered and the target would be banished. According to Hathaway's calculation, if they wanted to complete the enigma, they would need to spend at least tens of millions of kinnar. The game was completed in a short time. Sulan opened the system panel to check the attributes of the enigma. Enigma, unnamed intermediate enigma range, 10 kilometers in radius, core, Tower of the North Wind enchantment effect, not added, can add up to intermediate spells, anti-magic field, low-grade wizards are forbidden to cast spells within the enigma. Permanent effect, not added, can add up to intermediate spells, activated spell sequence, not added, can add up to intermediate spells, within the range of the enigma, all people on the same side will be enchanted by the enigma. The magic recovery speed will be increased by 50% to 300%. The difficulty of casting spells will be reduced by 50%. Within the range of the enigma, the difficulty of casting spells will be reduced. Within the range of the enigma, the concentration of elemental energy would also be increased. In the era of the Arcane Empire, even the ordinary civilians could live up to 150 or even 200 years old. In other areas that were not shrouded by the mystery, the residents did not have long lives. Hathaway and Sulan had to slowly add the spell effects on the enigma lock. They would be even busier in the future. After making the enigma lock, the next step of the Wizard Tower's transformation could be put on the agenda. Sulan. With the sound of footsteps, Hathaway came over and said, "Now it's time to consider upgrading the Wizard Tower to a floating space tower." "It is indeed time to upgrade it," Sulan nodded and said, "By the way, do you have enough materials for the floating ring and the elemental fission furnace?" "The materials needed for the elemental fission furnace have been prepared. We can begin the experiment. Also, the floating ring can be made. However, there are still some parts of the Magus Tower that need to be built. The base of the Sorcerer Tower needs to be reinforced. The foundation of the Sorcerer Tower needs to be replaced with obsidian. Obsidian was hard and had good magic conductivity. In the past, in order to save money, Su Len used some ordinary materials for the foundation of the Wizard Tower, and then added the hardening spell to make it so tough. In addition, the base of the Wizard Tower and the rocks below needed to be separated. Fortunately, Hathaway had taken these into consideration when building the Wizard Tower. The successful foundation transformation of the Wizard Tower was very boring, so these things were handed over to the rock golems. With the addition of obsidian and the hardening spell, the strength of the entire Wizard Tower had been improved again. Theoretically speaking, when building the Wizard Tower in the future, it was best to reinforce all the places with the hardening spell, because the floating space tower that roamed in the astral world must reach the strength of a strategic defensive fortress. Ordinary rock structures were completely inadequate. The enemies encountered in the astral world were very powerful, and ordinary equipment could not survive. In this way, the workload in the future would be even more terrifying. And when the floating space city was upgraded, the number of hardening spells needed would increase by several times. Under normal circumstances, a floating space city had a total of 3 layers of protection. The first layer was a super-large energy protective force field, which could withstand the impact of small meteorite showers in the astral world. It could withstand the energy pressure in a special environment, and at the same time, stabilize the ecological balance inside the floating space city. It could isolate harmful substances from the outside world, allowing the floating space city to be in an environment similar to the ground. The second protective barrier was the Maze Lock, which was a top-level rune that integrated strategy, attack, and defense. Because the energy consumption was too large, it would only be activated in a combat state. To keep the maze lock open for a long time, it required a huge amount of energy. The Arcanists could keep the entire maze lock open all the time because they had the mice energy nucleus. The last layer of protection was the strength of the floating space city itself. This was to ensure that the floating space city would not be destroyed so quickly when the first 2 barriers were broken. At the same time, its structure would be quite stable. A large number of buildings in the floating space city must be hard enough, otherwise, they would collapse and shatter before they could fly. The floating space city was the most outstanding building in the era of the Arcane Empire. It was the war fortress of the Arcanists. Those Arcanists relied on the floating space city to conquer and colonize countries in the multiverse. At that time, they directly drove the floating space city to leave the material plane and go to the astral world. When leaving the range of the main material world, it was easy to have problems if the base was not hard enough to escape gravity. Therefore, the floating space city needed to be built as strong as possible. When the floating space city was teleported as a whole, the pressure that the floating space city needed to withstand was extremely high. The pressure brought about by the space jump was very high. If the strength was not enough, the floating space city would directly collapse and disintegrate during the teleportation. From the era of the Arcane Empire to the present, the number of times that the floating space city had been teleported as a whole was very limited. The few recorded teleportations took place in the battlefield with the gods. The strategic space jump to stop the gods consumed energy at the same time was provided by multiple mice energy nuclei. A single mice energy nucleus could not provide the energy. Su Len could only wait until the elemental fusion furnace was completed to try it. Milky Way, scan the overall structure of the Wizard Tower. Scanning. Perfecting the data. Drawing the three-dimensional image. Soon, a series of data flowed quickly, and the three-dimensional image of the Wizard Tower appeared in front of them. In addition, Milky Way also marked the situation of the Wizard Tower. The linked area needs to be disconnected. The link separation components also need to be reinstalled here to support the Wizard Tower when taking off and landing. The structure of the Wizard Tower is stable. The energy channel is normal. The energy budget of the elemental pool is insufficient. It seems that before the completion of the elemental fission furnace, the floating space city can only be airborne for a period of time after storing energy, Su Len said after looking at the energy consumption budget. Although using the elemental pool could allow the floating space city to take off, it could not be airborne for a long time, and the means of attack were limited. What is the energy transmission efficiency? 70%. The energy transmission consumption is a bit high. Su Len checked and said, the energy channel needs to be optimized, or too much energy will be wasted. Su Len swiped his finger on the three-dimensional image in front of him, and the three-dimensional image world was divided into two, showing the plane of the wizard tower. Then he tapped on some parts of the wizard tower a few times, and soon several images of the energy channel like a spider web appeared. Milky Way, calculate the energy consumption of all the energy channels, and calculate the energy channel optimization plan at the same time. It was a huge project to rely on manual labor to calculate the energy channel consumption, but with the help of the Wizard Tower's spirit, Milky Way, it was easy to put her in charge. Soon, a large number of data flowed in front of Sullen's eyes, and a large number of red marks appeared on the energy channel like a spider web in the Wizard Tower. There were many areas of the floating space city that needed to be optimized. While Su Len was busy remodeling the Wizard Tower, Hathaway was not idle. After experimenting with the elemental fission furnace again, she finally began to try to make it. In addition to Hathaway, Alex was also assigned some tasks. As a legendary wizard, she also had the ability to make the materials needed for the floating space city. Alex was making the floating space ring. The floating space ring required a lot of precious materials. The main material was mithril, and some orichalcum and arcane dust also needed to be added. In addition to arcane dust, astral silver sand and arcane steel were also needed. In the case of using elemental fire and astral sand to forge, ordinary steel could be added with a small number of rare materials to make arcane steel ingots in batches. Arcane steel ingots were very durable and had good magic conductivity. Its strength was about 7 or 8 times that of ordinary steel, and it could be permanently reinforced with hardening. Its final strength was more than 10 times or even more than ordinary steel. In the future, this material would be used in many places. The surface of the smelted arcane steel ingots looked similar to titanium alloy. In the future, a large number of arcane steel materials would be used to make legendary golems. About 1 pound of astral sand and 1 pound of arcane dust were added for every 100 pounds of arcane steel. The astral sand and arcane dust collected by Su Len and Hathaway last time were used very quickly. About 1 pound of astral sand and 1 pound of arcane dust were added for every 100 pounds of arcane steel. The astral sand and arcane dust collected by Su Len and Hathaway last time were used very quickly. About 1 pound of astral sand and 1 pound of arcane dust were added for every 100 pounds of arcane steel. The astral sand and arcane dust collected by Su Len and Hathaway last time were used very quickly. About 1 pound of astral sand and 1 pound of arcane dust were added for every 100 pounds of arcane steel. The astral sand and arcane dust collected by Su Len and Hathaway last time were used very quickly. Chapter 592. Hathaway gently waved the magic staff in her hand. A light flashed, and a few fist-sized magic pearls flew up. The energy in the elemental pool was constantly being drawn out, and the concentration of elemental elements in the room was shockingly high. Making an elemental furnace required a lot of energy, and now more than half of the energy in the elemental pool was being used here. On the enchantment table next to her, adamantine, mithril, orichalcum, arcane steel, arcane dust, astral silver sand, magic gems, and other materials were all prepared. Along with the light, a few magic pearls of different colors turned into powder, and the colorful pearl powder quickly merged with the light. The originally blue spirit light now flickered with a rainbow-like radiance. Change form. Hathaway gently pointed the magic staff, and her eyes turned silver. Magic light flew out from the magic staff, and the arcane steel ingots on the enchantment table directly floated up and gradually melted. As the arcane steel melted, the rainbow-like light also merged with it. Creation. The melted arcane steel quickly turned into silver metal under the light, and this piece of metal continued to transform into the shape that Hathaway wanted. At the same time, the arcane dust on the enchantment table quickly disappeared, and a few blue-silver crystals appeared in front of her. Elemental fire. With a light shout, the surrounding mana instantly surged. In the next second, a cluster of light blue flames appeared out of thin air, and then instantly grew stronger like adding oil to a fire. The light blue elemental fire had a very high temperature, but this kind of fire that was researched by wizards was very easy to control. It was suitable for refining potions, and it was very useful for making other things. As the fire grew stronger, pieces of metal ingots quickly melted in the elemental fire. Hathaway gently waved her hand, and a few magic gems instantly turned into countless sparkling powder that merged with the fire. The originally silver liquid in front of her quickly turned into a blue-silver liquid. Large amounts of liquid metal continuously fused with various materials, and then transformed into various shapes under the spell of creation. The structure of an elemental fission furnace was very complicated, and it required a lot of parts. Hathaway constantly controlled the elemental fire to refine. A day quickly passed. Even a legendary wizard would feel a little tired after such a long time of high-intensity casting, but the results were very good. While Hathaway was making the elemental furnace, Sulen was also commanding a large number of workers to modify the bottom of the wizard tower. The bottom of the wizard tower had to be replaced with obsidian, and the connection to the ground had to be disconnected. This kind of work couldn't be done by ordinary workers. Fortunately, there were many grey dwarves in the northern city, and they directly dug according to the blueprint. The bottom of the wizard tower had to be completely hollowed out, and then connected with the metal runes. When the tower was lifted, the metal runes used to connect the tower would be separated, and they would be used to connect with the tower when it was landing. The Durgar's excavation skills were very advanced. Apart from the main support points, the entire bottom of the tower had been hollowed out. Next, a large number of metal constructs would be installed. The efficiency of the hundreds of grey dwarves was very high. It only took a few days for the bottom of the wizard tower to be completely excavated. A large number of hardening spells were cast on the excavated space, and the whole ground became very hard. In addition, a large number of wizard apprentices were installing the metal runes. In another laboratory in the wizard tower, Alex was refining a floating ring. In the middle of the experiment, a floating ring with a diameter of about 5 meters quietly floated in the air. Alex was concentrating on engraving runes on it. Silver spell energy constantly outlined runes, and then after fusing with mithril and astral silver sand, they slowly merged into the floating ring. The floating ring flashed, and in the next second, a rune appeared on the floating ring. At this time, a large number of runes had been engraved on the floating ring, and the runes were connected from head to tail, covering the entire floating ring. As the last rune fell, the floating ring suddenly burst into a dazzling light, and then the light dissipated, and everything returned to normal. The wizard tower's work lasted for 2 months. When Sulen finished installing all the metal runes at the base of the wizard tower, and the wizard tower's energy circuit was optimized, Hathaway's work was almost done. In the laboratory, a powerful energy wave shrouded this place. Hathaway embedded the last energy crystal in the rune body in front of her, and then put in the already prepared element fission fuel. With a strong light, the high-tech elemental furnace in front of her slowly started up. An amazing energy wave was transmitted from the elemental furnace, and the surrounding energy channels quickly lit up. The powerful energy filled the wizard tower in a flash. Hum! The whole wizard tower shook slightly at this moment, and a powerful elemental tide spread out from the wizard tower. Phew, it's finally done. Looking at the elemental furnace in front of her, Hathaway's tired face flashed with a trace of relief. Sulen, who was instructing the craftsman to check the metal runes, suddenly felt a powerful energy coming from the wizard tower to China. The energy wave was a little shocking, and the aftermath was more than 10 times stronger than the elemental pool in the wizard tower at full capacity. This is the elemental furnace? Su Len was slightly stunned, and then he reacted. Hathaway did it. Then, a teleportation light flashed on Sullen's body, and in the next second, he appeared on the astrology platform. Without stopping, Su Len walked directly to the laboratory. As soon as he arrived at the door of the laboratory, the originally closed door suddenly opened, and a thin figure walked out. It was Hathaway. Seeing Su Len walking in hurriedly, Hathaway smiled at him and said, "It's done. You've worked hard." Su Len looked at the tired Hathaway, stretched out his arms, and directly pulled her into his arms. "Don't worry about these things for now. You're tired now and need to rest. Everything can wait until you've rested. Okay." Hathaway nodded gently, and then lay in Sullen's arms like a kitten. Su Len waved his hand gently, and the door of the laboratory suddenly closed. Then, Su Len pointed his finger lightly, and streaks of lightning shot out from his hand. As soon as these streaks of lightning appeared, they quickly merged and connected, and soon formed a lightning net that enveloped the entire laboratory. Seeing that the lightning net had sealed the laboratory, Su Len nodded, and then smiled at Hathaway. He directly lifted her up with his arms, and in the next second, the teleportation light flashed, and the two disappeared from the wizard tower. Su Len put Hathaway on the bed in the bedroom, and then watched her fall into a deep sleep. Only then did he walk out of the room, and put away his smile, and restored his dignified expression. "Guards." 2 guards appeared in front of him. "You two stay here. Without my order, no one is allowed to go in and disturb her," Su Len ordered directly. "Yes, sir." The 2 guards bowed and saluted. After arranging Hathaway, Su Len left. The preparation work in the wizard tower was almost done, and the next step was to wait for the test. Su Len came to the wizard tower. On the astrology platform, Karina, Chris, Grace, and the others were already there. When they saw Su Len coming, they all greeted him. "Su Len, that energy just now was from the elemental furnace?" Sister Hathaway finished making the elemental furnace? Chris couldn't wait to ask. Su Len nodded and said, "Yes, it's done. That energy just now was the energy wave when the elemental furnace was operating." "Really? That's so powerful. It's amazing." Karina couldn't help but say. "Since the elemental furnace is finished, does that mean our wizard tower can fly?" Phyllis asked excitedly. Su Len reached out and knocked on her head. "What are you thinking? We'll have to wait until Alex finishes making the floating ring." "Ouch, it hurts." Phyllis rubbed her head with a wronged expression. "After the elemental furnace is finished, the elemental pool can basically be eliminated. Even the elemental fission furnace at full power produces more than 100 times more energy than the elemental pool. The energy output is stable, and the size is small, so it's very convenient to use. We can also continue to increase the number of golems in our army. Originally, the Tower of Northern Wind could only use 2 to 3 legendary golems and 3 to 500 stone and steel golems. If there were more of them, the elemental pool would run out of energy. Now that they had the elemental furnace, they wouldn't have to worry about the energy shortage even if the number of golems doubled. "Oh, right. We got a lot of dragon blood from the dragon we killed last time. Get ready. I'll give you a dragon blood baptism in a few days to further increase the purity of your dragon blood. By then, you should be able to use some spells." Su Len pinched Phyllis's pretty face. "Really? I can use spells?" Phyllis was pleasantly surprised. She grabbed Sullen's arm tightly with both of her arms. Those amazingly developed weapons kept rubbing against his arm, and they were very elastic. "Of course. After the dragon blood baptism, your dragon blood will be further improved, and your strength will also increase. As a dragon disciple, you're born with the ability to cast spells. Of course, a warlock's ability to cast spells is weaker than a wizard's, but you should pay attention and try to be a wizard in the future. I understand. When will the dragon blood baptism be carried out? Phyllis asked eagerly. After I'm done with all the things I need to do. Sulen smiled and said, the dragon blood baptism can be carried out 5 times in total. If you encounter a black dragon, a blue dragon, or a green dragon in the future, you can carry out another dragon blood baptism. After a few baptisms, your body should be comparable to a legendary warrior's. You're tuning in to the Unparalleled SwordWill YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.